We are here today to discuss the school reopening, and let us begin by Mrs. Corcoran.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we have a PowerPoint presentation that can kind of guide us through our talking points today. So if we can bring that up anytime. So Michael Drennan from the Health Department is joining us again today, and in actuality, hi Michael. The very first slide in the deck is regarding positive labs, then the daily percent positive. So if he maybe wanted to speak to that and the trending he's seeing in the county, that would be great. You're muted.
Systems have different ways to unmute yourself. Good afternoon, everyone.
Jamal.
So, happy to talk about the trends that we're looking at here. So this comes out of the flash report, which the county puts together every day, looking at daily point in time percent positivity. And so we can see, you know, it's kind of fluctuates, and this is due to how labs are reported back from actual lab providers or laboratories. And so some days you see spikes just because there's more labs reported total that day, or fewer labs reported total that day, which causes a fluctuation in the percent positivity. So with that being said, we like to look at these in 7-day averages or 14-day averages, helps smooth out the curve. So the graph itself is looking at single days, and then on the right is 7-day averages based by week. So it kind of smooths out the graph a little bit. That's kind of the purpose of that. So you can see if we go back, can I move my, I'll move my window with everyone's faces in it. So if we go back to June 8th, we see that the 7-day average was 1%, and we see over the next several weeks that it increases as the disease spreads in the community, and testing in and of itself increases over time, and peaking in the 7-day average on the 6th of July. After that point in time, we start to see a slow decrease in the percent positivity. So that's a positive trend and a good sign in the data. However, this is just one piece of information. We still know there's a lot of disease out there just based on the number of positive cases that are reported daily. So we like to look at percent positivity. I like to look at the volume of cases that are in the community. And then certain times we like to look at rate of disease in the community. It's just another way of kind of analyzing the burden of disease that's out there. Even with the positive trend of percent positivity rate, still want to emphasize and keep our focus on the tools that we're putting in place to prevent spread. Social distancing, masking, good hand hygiene, and also seeking medical care, avoiding contact with others when you're ill. All those are key steps, and because people have been taking those steps is one of the reasons why we're seeing this decrease. So to slow those steps or kind of start to ignore them now could easily result in these numbers going back up. So positive trend, but we got to keep our focus on the things that have implemented that or influenced that trend, and keep up those strategies. Happy to answer any questions or clarify if I was rambled and confusing.
Mrs. Goodwin.
In looking at this report and others, it looks like we have had a 7-day trend of 9%, 11%, 9%, 7%, 7.1%. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And what I would consider good to go back to school is 3 to 5%. Do you agree?
I think picking a hard number is difficult. Obviously, the lower the percent, the better. with that being said, we're trending toward that right direction. But yes, something in the range of 35% is obviously better than where we are now. But we're clearly seeing a decrease, at least in the percent positivity in the number of cases right now.
And that's a wonderful thing. My other concern, of course, is that the pediatric numbers have gone up. We're testing more children. We only test them at Robert L. Taylor, correct?
To my understanding, yes. The health department will test adolescents as well in the test sites that we're doing twice a week in South County, and I believe, I'm not 100% positive, I think that University has started doing the test site at University has started doing some adolescent testing as well, but I think there's an age threshold on it. I'm not sure what it is. It may be 5 and above, but I'm not positive.
And we are not doing enough testing in South County. I don't think today we're doing any testing in South County, only sporadically, correct?
Twice a week. I'd have to look back to confirm. I believe those are Wednesdays and Thursdays.
But I think we are doing some sporadically in Inglewood and in Northport. Would it not be a good idea to do something more toward the center of the county? Any availability of testing would be good. What we've tried to do as a health department, at least our efforts, are to focus where there was increased demand, and that's kind of why it's been sporadic and we moved around. We've had certain situations where we didn't get a lot of response to the testing sites, and we've moved to others. I see Chuck's connecting now as well. He can probably provide a little bit more insight on that. But we've kind of moved around based on request and demand for testing in Central and South County. Thank you.
Eric?
I want to expand on Ms. Goodwin's question about opening. I'm going to ask the converse, closing. Once we open, what criteria should we be looking at to realize, or the Florida Department of Health can be looking at to close the schools? Is there going to be a certain percentage that you're going to want to close the schools at?
Right now, I can't speak to that. I'm waiting on some additional guidance from our central office, which may or may not include threshold numbers for closing. Locally, and as it stands now, we'll be looking at the incidence of disease within schools to kind of drive some of the recommendations we make. If these numbers start to go the other direction, we'll definitely have to have conversations about appropriate steps to take. But a threshold number right now I don't have, and would have to seek additional guidance from our central office related to that.
Well, let me ask the question a different way then. Ms. Goodwin asked you the question about 3 to 5, and you mentioned that we're trending down towards that rate. If we're not at that rate on August 31st, are you saying that that you won't recommend that we open?
Oh, no, sir. No, sir. That's not what I was saying at all. Trending in that direction is positive, and anything less, numbers less than what they are now is encouraging. But to set a specific threshold is not something that that we're looking to do at this time. I've read other things that other documents and literature that talks about that 5% number, but that's not guidance that the health department is currently looking to enforce or put out there. So as we trend toward those numbers, that's positive. I think the plan that's being put in place is very appropriate and addresses a lot of the steps that need to be done to reduce the impact of spread and impact in the classroom. But to set a threshold number, I think it's hard to look at just one number and make a decision based on that. There's a whole host of other factors I think.
So let's go beyond just one number. What criteria would you use to say it's irresponsible to open? Using whatever numbers you want, testing, deaths, spread, whatever criteria you want to use. We're up here, we're trying to make decisions, and we're looking upon you as a subject matter expert. So I'm asking you, what data or what numbers or what criteria would you use where you would say it's irresponsible to open up brick and mortar?
It's an excellent question. And
Only kind of ask.
the guidance that we receive from our central office guides our response locally on the decisions that we make and the guidance that we put out. So talking about looking at different numbers, we'd want to look at the percent positivity. I'd want to look at the burden of disease in the community as a whole and burden of disease amongst adolescents specifically and in the schools. And those would be numbers that we would look at to make a decision on any guidance that we would put out as far as opening or closing schools. But at this time, our guidance from the central office and from the Surgeon General is that brick and mortar schools need to open. And that's, the guidance that we're going to follow. Obviously,
I realize that, but I'm trying to find out, we're trying to plan here. And people are looking for some sort of certainty. People are looking, to have some sort of determination. And are you getting any guidance from Tallahassee regarding that?
We are getting guidance, and we're currently waiting on a document that's being put together, hoping to see it this week or early next week, that will have more concrete information and threshold numbers we may look at.
Is it possible for you to share us preliminary numbers? Preliminary guidance?
At this time, we do not.
Okay. All right, then I'm done with my questions then. Thank you.
Bridget?
You're welcome.
Bridget?
Hi, everyone. Thank you. And thank you, Michael and Chuck, for being here. A lot of my questions were in that same vein. I know we're trending on the downward, keeping a very close eye on that. I recognize as policymakers, we certainly would love to have a hard and fast number that would give us some guidance as to when to do what. But understanding that still, there are areas and documentation that have put that 5% threshold. My question often is, what is that 5%? Is that in fact what we need to be looking at? So based on the information, Michael, that you just said that's coming out, perhaps that's something we evaluate. Again, I am a firm believer of with the proper safety precautions, which are a lot. I believe there is an abundantly a need for us to open brick and mortar for long-term detrimental impacts that aren't associated necessarily to COVID-19, but a number of other areas. So I look forward to future conversations and more data that can be provided to help us guide those decisions. But I think that's really where I stand and appreciate the information.
Shirley?
I mean, I would be more than happy to have more conversation once we have more concrete guidance. And definitely would touch base with Jody and the team once we have that information and share it with the group. That's not an issue at all. I just, at this time, I don't want to speculate on any of the guidance or numbers without having it in hand.
Shirley?
Mine goes back to the testing, and I understand, can any child get tested up at the Robert L. Taylor, or do they have to show symptoms before they can be tested?
At this time, any child can be tested. I believe there's soon to be a shift on some of the state-run test sites, and I'm not sure if those are primarily on the East Coast or if it's going to be all test sites looking at individuals that are in high-risk groups or currently symptomatic. But at this time, at the Robert Taylor site, any child can be tested, regardless of symptoms.
There's also a site, doineedacovid19test.com, and that if you click on Florida, it shows a couple of pharmacies that are doing it, America's Pharmacy and Hedges Pharmacy. Are you aware of other pharmacies that might be doing tests? Because I heard that CVS might be.
I know CVS is doing it as well. I don't know if it's all CVS's or just certain ones, but I know they require an appointment. But my understanding is it's pretty easy to call in and make an appointment and go in. But I don't know which CVS is. Individuals just have to call the branch closest to them.
Yeah, well, I know, the do I need a COVID-19 test, you can click on one of them and you just kind of make your appointment right there like you would going in for the test. I'm pleased to see that these numbers are going down too. Do you think it might be good for us to require teachers or students to get a negative test before they start school? That's something I've been told to look at?
So I think there's, pros and cons to doing that. I think the closer, if you're going to go that route, the closer that you request the test be done is more beneficial, because the test is just a point in time. So it's just that day. So if you had staff get tested today or students get tested today and they came back negative, they could easily be exposed or incubate the disease over the next 14 days or a month before school starts. So if that was a route you were going to take, and like I said, there's value to knowing if someone was asymptomatic, you could exclude them before classes started, before they attended class. But you're going to want that result or test to be done so that they get the results as close to school opening as possible.
So if somebody has symptoms, they should definitely be tested before they come to school.
Yes, that would be my recommendation. If someone has symptoms, they should definitely be tested. And they shouldn't come to school if they have symptoms.
Yes, or if they've been close to somebody with COVID, they shouldn't be coming back unless they get a negative test back, correct?
That's correct. Well, if someone's been a contact to a person who's positive, we're going to want them to self-quarantine for 14 days from their last date of exposure. So yes, so if it's already past that date, it would be fine for them to come to school. If they're still within that 14-day window, we'd want them to not attend.
And if they show no symptoms?
Right, that is correct.
If they start showing symptoms, the clock starts over again, correct?
That's correct. And if they're showing symptoms, that's when we would encourage them to get tested.
Thank you.
So what I'm hearing is that the number that is currently at 7.1% is the number, if we have to decide today whether or not to open schools, we would go with the 7.1%, and there's no place else that we can go to get further information or further clarification as to whether or not we should open the schools. Is that correct?
I'm not sure if I entirely. So if you were basing your decision solely on the percent positivity rate, then yes, this is the source for that information.
So we're really left out here alone to make this decision of whether we're going to go back or not, based on the information that we have to date, and based on best practices that we're putting in place. Okay, I guess I made my statement instead of a comment. Jane?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the pediatric results from last Friday's printout from the state, and Sarasota County had a positivity rate of 9.8. We have 26 cases of MISC in the state, which is a scary, scary thing. So we would look, I think, at that number along with the positivity rate number, correct? As certain factors. I know some counties have said, oh, the number might be high because we have a prison or we have many, many nursing homes, and they were trying to find a way of extrapolating that information out from, I know in Tallahassee they were trying to do this, and there isn't any way that I know of taking those numbers out and saying, only give us the core, for the students and faculty and staff of a school. But I'm not really ready to make a decision yet. I'm still looking at this. I know that we have had to make some decisions where our staff was concerned last week, which gives them pause and gives me pause for taking a leave of absence or early retirement and so forth, and we'll talk about that, I guess, a little later. But I certainly appreciate, Michael, your help and the whole organization of the health department. We've always had such a great relationship together, and I think what we need to do is, just continue to, I guess, kick the can down the road a little bit. I feel better when Dr. Asplin is here next week with his leadership, but I think at some point in time we need to take a look at some numbers and some metrics and say, okay, if this is existing, we go remote. If this is existing, we might go to some type of a hybrid or a blended, which we aren't doing today, but I know that. And then, this would be full open the doors. I've been reading about Indiana. I've been reading about Georgia, my home state. I've been reading about Tennessee and schools opening up. And before one day or a week was passed, they had quite an outbreak in the school districts. These were all smaller districts than ours, but nonetheless, they had some severe concerns. My concern is we don't have tests. We need tests. We need quick action 15-minute tests. Is there any way that we could at some point look to that? I've talked to other health departments in the state, and they're looking at helping the school district get tests, even if it was just on a point of sickness within the school district. But, not to test everybody as they came in the doors, because we know it's only that one point in time. But do you have any information? I know there are these Abbott tests and other tests that are used, the Sophia tests that ambulances use and so forth. Are those available? Is that something we could look at and then get really into our own contact tracing? Because I think we're going to have to do some of that as well.
So yes, the opportunity and availability of the rapid test exists. The machines, to the best of our research, are not that difficult to get at all, and actually not outrageously expensive either. The problem is the reagents or the kit that you need to actually run the test. When we've investigated looking at getting devices to do that, we've been told late August to times in September and October to get any volume of reagents or the test kits to actually run. So we could get a machine now, we just won't be able to run any tests because we don't have won't be able to get any of the test kits, essentially.
Jane, can I ask you a question? The pediatric numbers that you have, are they for Sarasota or for Florida?
I have the Sarasota. They break it down by counties. They only put the report out every Friday.
The 9.8% that
was
you
last
quoted.
Friday.
Was that for Sarasota?
That's for Sarasota. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Eric?
Yeah, I like this trend. I do agree with Ms. Goodwin that we need, statistics, and if you go above this, then triggers that. That was the whole point of my line of questioning before. So I got a feeling Ms. Zucker's going to continue the phase of having me speak after Ms. Goodwin.
I like that.
Right. But I want to expand on Mrs. Brown's comment about testing, and it sounds like that may or may not be feasible, but taking that one step down from testing is, and we've talked about this, and it seems that logistically it's become problematic, but taking temperatures, is the problems with taking temperatures, do they get outweighed with the benefits of taking temperatures with students as they come to school every day?
Just to clarify, the question is directed at me, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
I think all the questions right now are being directed at you.
Okay. There is value in taking temperatures, and I think that's something the team has to decide whether or not the benefit outweighs the negative. The negative being the time commitment to test all students as they come in the building, and how are you going to manage the volume of students that will be coming in, because obviously you want them to still, to the best of their ability, social distance when they're coming in, or at least be wearing masks when they're coming in. Obviously, the value of taking a temperature at that time is you identify someone who would have a fever and could exclude them from coming to school. So yes, there is value to it. It's just a logistics process of determining if it's feasible to achieve that in a timely fashion.
Now, while you don't have to handle the logistics, but you are an expert, I would look at you an expert as far as taking the temperature. If you had to guess, and this is a guess, do you think the benefits outweigh the logistic nightmare, or you think that it's not as beneficial as the logistics nightmare that would create? But you don't have enough information to answer the question.
Sure. Based on I don't know that taking temperatures is the best tool. I don't know if it's worth the bang for your buck.
Okay, thank you.
Can I expound on it a little bit? Or?
Yes, sir.
The interesting thing and the frustrating thing about this disease is its ability to present in a host of different ways on different people. So the constellation of symptoms is rather broad. I think to focus our attention on just fever, we're gonna miss a lot of people anyway, and so I don't know that it's the best bang for your buck there.
Okay. And I want to expound a little bit on what Ms. Zucker was trying to get at. And I just want to, I think you've said it before, but I just want to make sure we clarify. You are by no means recommending that we don't open schools.
At this time, that is correct.
Okay. You're recommending that we continue on with the existing plan, correct?
Yes, continue on with the existing plan, continue to monitor the numbers and see what additional guidance comes out at this time.
And when will you get that additional guidance that you said that you were waiting on? Because that'll help do what Ms. Goodwin had previously discussed.
Well, it'll help us a lot, and I know it'll help you a lot as well. I'm hoping the end of this week, early next week.
Okay.
That's what has been communicated to us from Tallahassee.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Let me follow up. So continue on with existing plan means to open school on August 31st.
Yeah, that would be our recommendation at this time.
Okay, thank you. Shirley?
In regarding to the temperature, I have the white paper from the Academy of American Academy of Pediatrics, and it says screening for symptoms is recommended at the beginning of every day for each student, teacher, and staff member prior to entering the facilities. The Florida chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics does not recommend temperature checks at the school. It's expensive, time-consuming, and not sensitive for infection. Our organization does recommend that parents check their child's temperature at home before they come to school. However, these children who have a fever should not go to school. And they said that we should be looking for the symptoms for the criteria, the fever, chills, muscle aches, headaches, sore throat, or a decrease in smell or taste, or a cough, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing. I would say sneezing too. We don't want kids sneezing and throwing all their germs about. But if they meet any of those criteria, they should not be coming to school. And just like the students shouldn't be coming, and neither should the staff.
And Mrs. Brown, we are planning to get to parents some procedures that we're asking them to follow. And for students who are coming on campus for their learning, we are specifically asking parents to check their child's temperature every morning and to do an assessment of other symptoms as well. So that's something we're specifically asking of parents.
Yeah, so we're basically following what the American of Pediatrics has asked us to do. Thank you.
I've been told, though, Ms. Art, that a lot of our parents and families do not have thermometers. So, I mean, what do we do about that? And especially our low socioeconomic parents, they do not have thermometers. I didn't have one until recently because of this COVID. So how can we, I mean, I know we're buying everything that we can possibly buy for everyone, but how are we going to be guaranteeing that these parents will have thermometers to be able to monitor their kids' fevers?
Well, I don't suppose that we can guarantee that. I suppose if parents came to us and sought our assistance with that, we could perhaps, and I'm just speculating now, but perhaps we could work with some of our local foundations who have been very helpful and looking for ways in which to help us, and that may be a very excellent suggestion, very concrete, tangible, to get a cache of thermometers that we can distribute, or they can distribute. We can work together to get thermometers to families who don't have them. They're not a high cost item, but they are very important, obviously, to do what we're asking and what both the Health Department and the American Academy has discussed. So I would think that could be something.
I've spoken to a few principals, so I know this is a fact that they do not have thermometers.
So that's something I think we could at least look into. I think that's a good point.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Yeah. So moving on and speaking of numbers, I've asked Krista to kind of come and give you an update on where we're kind of sitting with our enrollment. I know she's been working really closely with Denise's team, Rodney, and Dawn Stout on our enrollment, and we're seeing some trends that we wanted to kind of share with you. Do you want to sit here? Come on.
Excuse me 1 minute. Jane?
Well, I just wanted to say that, today was the first day back for teachers in Manatee, or yesterday was, and they've already had an outbreak at a school of COVID. So this is what is my worst nightmare, is that we'll come back and it will be like the forest fires that are going on in California now. We'll just have a blaze of new cases. So it's right here. So Manatee may give us a lot of good information because they are ahead of us as to how, how to look at this.
Yep, they have staff on campus.
They're a little higher in case levels than we are, but we have more hospitalized patients in COVID than they do.
Thank you.
Do you want to, or, well, she has a computer, so. Yeah. Okay. That's it.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So, do they have the slide in front of them to see it? Okay.
Yes.
Back one. There we go. Thank you.
So this is the slide that I will be talking to you about. So, we've been monitoring the enrollment that is in our student information system. And we have enrollment numbers for all of our schools at this point in time. We also have information about InfoSnap, where they are registering, and those numbers are not in the enrollment in the SIS system. Based upon information that we see right now, virtual school from 2020 year to the 2021 year has gone from 34 students to 516, an increase of 482. In that number, there's blended information. 95 of those students were homeschool students. So in that respect, it doesn't impact our staffing enrollment because we weren't planning on those students anyway. Homeschool, as you can see, in 2020 was 1,128. And then for 21 so far, it is 1,622. So that has increased 484. That is also blended at different grade levels. The main change at this point in time is in our elementary enrollment. You can see at the bottom it says the total projected FTE change for our district at this point in time is 1,830 FTE, which is different than enrollment, but it's how we're funded. The majority of the decrease that you see there is in kindergarten. You can see at this point in time, 2020, we projected and we had 2,535 kindergarten students. Our projection for 21 was almost exactly the same because we knew the Florida Family Empowerment Scholarship students would be going to that as well. But at this point in time, we're down 1,000 students. So something to keep in mind is that during our 5-day count, when we are projecting for October, we're normally down about 500 students. It takes time for people to get here and to enroll. But you can see that this is a lot more than that number. So what's really wonderful about the team that you have of principals and staff is that they are also monitoring this. And they are calling parents and asking them if they knew when they were signing up for virtual, was it virtual or did they want remote? So some are changing. The other thing that's happening is because they are watching it, they are holding units, meaning staffing allocations. Because with this decrease, it would mean we have a decrease in staffing. So we are actively monitoring it every week. We have enrollment information projected, and we have what's in the system at the time, and we're working with the principals, as is the staff.
Shirley?
Well, I know that kindergarten is the significant decrease, and I can understand. I mean, it's hard to send your kids to kindergarten to begin with, let alone to send them into this cesspool of COVID that parents are all worried about. But isn't it true that the kindergarten numbers are always down?
Yes, that's a true statement. And actually, I have the InfoSnap information for kindergarten, and there's about 500 students in the InfoSnap, which is, basically they're going through the registration. It's just not transition to the enrollment. So that is true.
So we've got another 500 that are out there
Pending.
So
At this point in time.
So that's about half of these kids. Yes. It's disturbing to see this. But I understand, and this might be a Mitzi question, the funding on these, didn't they say something about holding our funding at a certain rate, and then they were going to adjust it?
So yes, I think the plan is to hold harmless for the October funding, but then they'll make up for it and true it up in the February one.
Yeah, and then October comes and there's another count, and those counts determine how much we receive. So if some of these students who switch to virtual or homeschool see that the numbers are down, that we got back to school and things are calming down and they wanted to come back to school,
Correct.
they could come back. It'd just be better if they did it before. What date is the October count?
It varies. It's usually the second to third week of October.
So it's early October. So if they did it in September, it would be much better for us if they're deciding to do that.
Correct. The virtual school students are only funded based upon successful completion. So if they make a transition during the semester and they don't successfully complete, there is no funding to be received. We won't receive any funding at all. And if it's after the survey window, before they come back to a traditional school, they wouldn't be counted there either. So we would pay for them for their virtual program, pay for them for their traditional school program, and receive no funding.
So come October, we're going to be seeing some adjustments in the funding we get from Tallahassee. And maybe we will see some changes. Either more kids will go to virtual school if things hit the fan, or if things calm down, they might be coming back to us.
Correct.
Thank you.
Eric?
So Ms. Brown talked about the 500, and you talked about InfoSnap. So is this comparing August 3rd to August 3rd or August 4th to August 4th? Is this comparing the start of the school year to today? What is this? What are these numbers comparing?
This is comparing what the budgeted projection was, what was sent back in January, what is what our FEFP is built on, our revenue. This is comparing that budgeted number to what is actually in the SIS system now for enrollment.
Okay, so it's not comparing how much we normally have signed up for August 3rd, August 4th, compared to the other time.
Correct.
Okay. And so you did talk about, and I'm very happy that Krista, normally she just talks about dollars and cents, but apparently she can do all kinds of numbers. So what do you think the trend will be, since you forecast budgets all the time, what do you forecast the numbers decrease to be by August 31st?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball,
Yeah,
but based upon the information that we have right now and the historical trending, like I said, there's usually about a 500 student swing historically. Now that's different than what we have now these times. So if you were to look at it and say, like in elementary, there's 1,500 students that were down right now, then you would say, and we know there's 500 in InfoSnap, so you'd say that's going to be about 1,000 difference. So if you're looking at that, then you would say, I would say you could be basing enrollment right now on a decrease of about 900 students. And I can tell you that the trending that we're seeing in elementary and the units that they're trying to hold, it looks like there would be about one unit at least, because kindergarten is our variance, so one unit at least at every school. Some schools are more, and they've been watching it and they are aware. Ironically, high schools are growing. We have more in high schools than we anticipated. And middle school is about status quo because of our charter school that closed in middle school. We waited to see where those students were going to go, so that's helping to offset the change. So basically, if you were to look at it at this moment in time, not knowing exactly what's going to happen with everything, you could say there could be about a 800 to 900 student decrease
And so-
going to virtual or homeschool and those things.
And Krista, how much is that in dollars?
So that would equate to approximately 7.4 million in FEFP dollars. Obviously, our referendum doesn't change because of
Right.
that. And what we would do is, because we are proactively working with our principals, staffing is our major expense. So that's obviously holding back the units, which they are already doing, and then as leaves are happening, holding those units as well, and then evaluating each school on an individual basis, plus looking district-wide to see the change that would need to happen. It would also filter into other areas, because obviously it's about 7.4 million FEFP, and the teaching units that would be decreased would come to about 3.6. So there's still another 3 million that needs to be decreased in other areas.
Wow. I'd like to say thank you, Krista, but I think at this point I'm not.
I agree.
So moving on from the enrollment, as she had mentioned, there's a change in the number of staffing units. So we're aware the personal leave deadline was last Friday, the 31st. So HR has compiled the list of those people who are taking leaves, the vacancies that we have currently, the increase in the number of retirements and so on. So if Danielle, you wanted to, so I just wanted you guys to understand it takes a village, as we all know, and so all of these people have been working really hard, and so I just wanted them to be able to tell you about their hard work, so.
Hi.
This slide, I'm the staffing administrator. This slide will share with you a little bit about a snapshot as to where we are at the moment. So what I wanted to share with all of you is what I look at from the staffing administrator lens is the number of vacancies that HR is asked to post that we're trying to fill. So keeping in mind what Krista just shared with you, principals may have vacancies on their position control that they are holding back and not asking to fill. Right now, from my lens, what we've been asked to fill as of July 31st is 43 instructional vacancies. So 34 of those are school-based, and then there are 9 others that are district-wide, things like speech-language pathologist, OT, things of that nature. So I wanted to provide for you just a glimpse of what that's looked like in years past. So remembering, and I just want to put a little shout out to my recruitment team that you all have been so great and let us have. So on July 30th of 2018, we had a total of 99 instructional vacancies still. July 29th, so the same time the next year of 2019, we had 46 vacancies, and we were thrilled. And now in 2020, July 31st, we had 34 instructional vacancies. So these were school-based instructional vacancies that we had. So in many respects, that's phenomenal. We're filling our vacancies, but then we have great concern because of everything that we're learning now with our student population, which Krista and I have been trying to stay aware and work together to determine what's going to happen if we continue to fill these vacancies. If we're continually successful filling the vacancies, well, we may have a 5-day count that's very, very ugly. So Krista and I are trying to figure out what are the next best steps to ensure that we're doing the best we can for our students, and we're being very mindful of who and how we're hiring so that we're not detrimental to people at the 5-day count who are then laid off because our students didn't come back. So that's where we are from a staffing lens. Do you want me to speak to leaves?
Sure.
Okay. So Mr. Hareda is otherwise engaged, so I'm going to speak to leaves. His crew has been collecting the data that we can share with you here. Sorry, the slide is a little bit light, but they've illustrated for you the numbers and the differences between resignations, leaves, and the different types of leaves, personal, medical, and child care from 1920 to 2021, both of which are from July 1st of that year to current. Okay, so they collected the same time frame in both of those years. And I think probably what is significant when you look at this slide is the numbers of personal leaves, which are so much greater this particular year as a result of the extension that we've allowed our crew to utilize if they wanted to take a year personal leave. As the staffing administrator, I just want to input for you that one of the things about taking a year leave is we staff those positions. So if we know there's a personal leave on the books for a year, it's approved to fill. So we need to be mindful of that also, because as these annual leaves increase, theoretically, historically, we would fill them. And then next year, when the person comes off of leave, we have to determine, we'll have 2 people in one spot, essentially speaking. So we have to be very mindful of that as we move forward. Medical leaves, interestingly enough, are down. Al and I have had a conversation about that to try to better understand it, and we think that maybe, I don't know, we're projecting, it may be that elective surgeries are not happening to the same degree they previously were, so people aren't scheduling medical leaves like they used to or have been in the past. It may be that people are waiting to make decisions because if they have the opportunity to work remotely, they can recover at home while teaching. That might be a mindset that people have. We don't know. We're just trying to better understand it because those numbers are not what I think we expected. And then the child care leaves are right in line with what we would expect. I will answer questions to the best of my ability. I'm not the leave expert, but I'm happy to try to field questions.
I think I heard you say it was July 1st to July 1st, or are these numbers through yesterday?
July 1st through yesterday, if I may have misspoke.
Okay.
So he collected numbers starting July 1 of each year through yesterday from each, they should represent the same pocket of time.
Thank you.
Yes.
Jane?
Have there been many requests for extending the leave of absence deadline?
To my knowledge, so that they processed through the weekend. To my knowledge, there haven't been a great number of additional requests since Monday morning.
But nobody's called you and said, hey.
So nobody has called me, and I can't speak to whether or not they've called him.
Nobody in the department has had an uptick in calls?
I will
Our
say,
customer service reps that are there waiting on everyone every day, right, Jody?
I will say that Pat Gardner did ask me the other day about extending through today, which we had discussed but had not made a decision to do anything with that. But just wanted to make sure that was on the record that Pat had requested we do that from the 31st through today.
Well, I've had a lot of people reach out to me about this issue. And of course, a lot of people really want us to go remote. And they don't want to have to take a leave of absence, but they're really frightened for their health. Many of them do have medical issues. So I was willing to say, let's give that a twirl. And I understand both sides of it. I understand you've got to staff for a new school year if we are in session. And notice I said if. But I think that, so let's say we don't go. Let's say we go remote. And then we maybe we need some of these teachers that have taken medical leave. I mean, can we pivot around and pick them up? Can we say, oh, okay, now we're going remote, so we need more, and you're a teacher, and you're a great teacher for us, but, maybe you could come back. I mean, is that something we can do? Do we do things like that? I have no idea.
A couple of thoughts about that, and Jody or Mitzi may jump in as well. First, following up on what Jody said, I know that I've spoken with Mr. Dubin, and he's certainly indicated an interest in extending the period in which we could grant leave.
Right.
So I think that's something that, at least that request is out there, and something we'll deal with probably in bargaining over the next week or next couple of weeks. People can always come back prematurely from leave.
Mm-hmm.
People are granted leave, and they, personal leave,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, is for a year. They can request to come back prematurely, meaning before the year is out. We are not required to take them back. Their leave is for a year. But if there are circumstances in which they request to come back and we have a vacancy, that's something that's available to us. So I think the answer to your question is that's possible. You'd have to see what the circumstances are. Would the vacancy line up that we have with the person's certifications? It may not be at the school they left. So that is a possibility. Certainly, it could be more beneficial in certain circumstances than having substitute teachers. It just depends on the circumstances at the time.
Oh, you bet. I mean, I think it definitely would. So I would like to see, at least have us discuss that, because I really think there are a lot of people that are sort of between a rock and a hard spot with this. And if there's some flexibility we could offer as we deal with these things, I think it would be very helpful to our staff.
One thing I would not like to see, though, is the bumping that we used to have years ago. I would like to be that it comes back into an open position.
Yes.
Right. If we're talking about a premature return from leave, I think that's what would be taught. If there were a position in that person's area of certification, then that may be a win-win situation.
Right.
But we're not going to be displacing.
Until June 30th.
Right. Until the next year.
There will be bumping as of June 30th when the person returns. If
That's
we have
next
filled
year.
their spot, then I now have 2 people in the same job. So,
Right. But not within the school year.
but not within the
That's-
2021 year.
That's what I
yeah.
was talking about.
Yeah.
Eric?
This is becoming very frustrating. I agree with Ms. Goodwin. We should extend, you guys figured it, my Achilles heel, I guess. We should extend the personal leave. Are we only talking about the leave that's on this piece of paper, or can we ask questions outside the leave on this chart?
You can ask any question you want.
Oh, okay, I just want to make sure. I wasn't sure. So I've had questions about people taking sick leave, people believing they got COVID at the school. I know the CARES Act covers a certain amount of time. Is that interpreted to be once for the school year, or is it per incident that there's a COVID?
The CARES Act is up to 10 days
per
person.
per year, per incident?
Per CARES Act.
Per the CARES Act, which runs through, I believe, December 31st.
So
you have-
it's 10 days for the life of the CARES Act?
Correct, per person.
Per person, not, so if somebody takes 10, if their school or class or gets closed down and we tell them they have to go home, they're going to get 10 days of CARES Act. Then if it happens again a month later,
Well, hopefully, if in that scenario, if we just tell them to go home, they'll continue, they're not sick in that scenario, and they can continue to telework. So they won't need to take any leave, CARES Act or otherwise, because they'll still be able to work.
but okay, maybe I should phrase it another way. If somebody is told to go home by us, not that they come to us, but if they're told by us, will they have to take sick leave?
Not if they're able to continue working.
But if you close the class, I mean, if you say, listen, everybody, this class, we're going to close down this class or close down the school, or, I mean, I assume that's why we're telling them to go home.
My belief would be, and I defer to the educators, but my belief would be if we told Mr. Robinson's class to go home, we would, and Mr. Robinson wasn't sick, he would continue working from home, teaching his class
Who have many students who may not be sick
who
either.
may not be sick, maybe nobody's sick. You know, I don't know, it depends on the circumstances, but so you wouldn't have to take leave. You could just work from home and get paid normally and not take leave.
That makes sense. Now, let's continue with Mr. Robinson, because I love the name. Mr. Robinson teaches a class. 10 of his kids get sick. He also gets sick. He goes home. He's out for 3 or 4 weeks. How does that work?
If
I think we're all getting emails of these different
Sure.
permutations.
If Mr. Robinson is our teacher and he gets sick and it's from COVID, he gets 10 days under the CARES Act, and then he would get to use his whatever leave he has. If Mr. Robinson gets sick and it's influenza or some other disease, then he would just use he wouldn't have the 10 days for the CARES Act. He would just use his leave.
Now, I just want to make sure I understand this again. I would think that if he got COVID and half of his class got COVID, the presumption is that Mr. Robinson got the COVID at school. And so
I don't know that we can necessarily assume that. I mean, I think that's something that would have to be determined on a case-by-case basis, because then you could potentially be talking about workers' compensation, which is something completely different.
Okay. So it's possible that you determine that they didn't get it from school, or can't determine that they got it from school. But in the example where you can determine that they got it from school, in that case, they would not have to use a sick leave?
I believe if the decision was made that someone got it from school, then you'd be in a workers' comp situation. But I would suggest to you that's not easy to make that determination in the case of an illness, as opposed to, say, an injury where a teacher, trips on a crack in the sidewalk and breaks her ankle.
But this is a level of we were talking earlier about criteria that people have for opening and closing of schools. This is a level of certainty that these teachers are looking for. I see that insurance person.
Art, could you hold it 1 minute?
People are looking for this level of certainty, and so they're worried. What's your criteria to determining if 100% of my class gets it? I'm Mr. Robinson. I have 20 kids in my class, and all 20 kids come down with COVID, and I come down with COVID. Clearly, you can't say, oh, you may have gotten it somewhere else. I mean, there would be preponderance of evidence to say you probably got it from teaching in the school.
Or maybe they got it from going somewhere else and brought it into their class.
And gave it to them.
Well,
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I appreciate that people want answers to every question, but there are times when I can't give you that definitive answer, either 100% yes or 100%
I understand, but when
no.
teachers hear that, they think we don't care. I mean, I would not take that position. If it's a board policy to figure out what the criteria is, and 100% of the kids in the classroom got it, then I would naturally assume that person had got it. If it's not a board decision, then I would hope that staff would have compassionate before grades. I don't know what the right analogy would be, but I would hope that we would have some sort of compassion on these people, on these staff. These people work for us. We're the ones who are we're responsible for making sure that they're safe.
Wrap it up.
And so if we have that certain level of responsibility, then we need to act accordingly. I mean, if we have the authority to tell them, you have to come to school, you have to go to work, or you're gonna have to take leave, that authority comes with a certain amount of responsibility. And for me, that responsibility means if something negative happens to these people as a direct result of our actions, then we as a school board must step up and protect them. If we're not willing to do that, these numbers here are going to skyrocket. If they feel that we're not willing to take responsibility for the actions that we make, then that is the linchpin of this entire plan. The weak link in this entire plan, chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Our weak link is if teachers don't show up to school. If teachers don't show up to school, the plans mean nothing. We can adjust by people going to virtual schools, but the weak link is if teachers don't come to school. So it's a paramount upon us that we show some compassion and certainty for these teachers so they can make these type of decisions.
Well, with respect to workers' comp, and I'm sure Lynn
let Lynn talk, please.
Okay.
Go ahead, Lynn.
I just want to make the comment on workers' comp. Of course, we are here for our employees, and if a situation, there can be a million situations for workers' comp. So with what you've said, Mr. Robinson, about the classroom, we can't give a guarantee to our employees because we have to investigate each case. If they feel it's work-related, we will allow them to obviously report that to workers' comp, and we have a third-party administrator that does the claims investigation for each one of those and will do that. This is considered an exposure case, and they will investigate that, and if it is determined to be related, then certainly it would be covered. But we can't put a guarantee because every single workers' comp case is different. And there's no, cannot give a guarantee that it will be covered under workers' comp.
And with respect to workers' comp, remember, that's not a fault-based system. So it's not a question of whether the school board did something right or wrong. It's a question of, did an injury or an illness occur while you're on the job? So, and to the extent someone, and you asked who ultimately is responsible, if there is litigation in workers' compensation, it's always ultimately up to the board to decide what you want to do with that, like any other piece of litigation. So ultimately, it will be the board's decision.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Shirley?
Following up on that, I agree. You can't just have, and it is frustrating that we just can't give a blanket answer to teachers or parents. I mean, because just because you're a teacher or even a student, it doesn't mean if you get COVID that you caught it at school. I mean, There are, just like there are in the general population, there are people out there that still don't think this is real. They think it's a hoax. And if you have, and I really think any staff member has to really consider this. If you are going to be going out to a party on Saturday night and you come back and that next week, your class gets sick, and maybe you don't even have the symptoms, but all your class gets sick, you may have brought it into that classroom. And I would hate to put that burden on any teachers to know that they may have caused this illness to spread through a class or to spread through a school. So I think that all of our staff, all of our parents, and our students need to be thinking not only of how they act in school, but how they act when they go home. Because it's not those 6 to 8 hours they're in school that they're going to be catching this. It's those other hours when they're outside of school that they can bring something in too. And like I said, we have to determine whether it happened at school, and there's things that we have to look at. And just because somebody may have gotten it, they may not be symptomatic. You might have to go home, but hopefully the teacher and the students will still be able to work remotely. I mean, it doesn't come to a complete end just because, COVID comes in. Hopefully, we've got crisis response teams at each of our schools set up that are going to be working with the Department of Health. They're going to be making these decisions. And it is up to each situation on when we close the classroom, when we close the school, who gets sent home, and what you're expected to do when you be home. It depends. I mean, if you can't breathe and you can't talk, we don't expect you to be doing remote learning from home. We'll get a substitute to do that. But those kids, when they get sent home, are still going to be getting an education, hopefully by their teacher. So I know a lot of people, go to the worst case scenario. We have plans in place for that worst case scenario, but hopefully we'll never have to get there. Our crisis response teams are going to intervene early to protect as many of our staff and students as possible. But we can only do so much at the school. It's what you do at home, and that's parents, teachers, and kids, how you behave. Because I know when these kids come back to school, they've been in their house, and I'm talking about teenagers more than anything. You know, now they're at school and they think it's all back to the same way of doing things. It isn't. It is different. If you're going to wear your mask at school, you're going to have to wear your mask at home when you get together with your friends too. And hopefully you don't get together and have a great big party with your friends and start taking the mask off and having a few drinks, because that is what's going to spread this. And hopefully they keep the bars closed for at least another month or two, because that will change things too. So it's our actions in school. We can only keep you safe at school. We can't keep you safe away from school. And please don't do something away from school that's going to come in and then affect the classroom.
This is a great dialogue, but let me tell you that we've done 3 or 4 pages, and we have about 15 more pages to get through in an hour. And Bridget, I know you're online. Please ask your question.
I know it's a quick comment, and I would just say, actually, I agree with both what Eric and Shirley had mentioned. I think, I agree that every scenario, there's a certain amount of the uncertainty, whether you're a staff or a member of family or student, is what's really causing a lot of concern. But as we talk about staff and we talk about various scenarios, what buffer can we, add if there's even a contemplation of adding additional days that would go into, COVID pay, and I'm just putting that out there. That's something discussed from a bargaining standpoint, largely why when we looked at the financial uncertainty of this year and the trying to find conservative ways of projecting into the future because of scenarios like this. But I also agree with what Lynn said, and what Shirley said is the personal responsibility is going to be key, but there are so many various scenarios, and we'll certainly be looking into that as when a workers' compensation situation would apply. But I agree with going back to what Eric said, is if there is some roadmap that we can illustrate visually, and that may already be something that the communications department has created for staff to better understand if this happens, then what, that may allow for some ease of concern that many of our staff are feeling.
Thank you.
Okay, so since Lynn is still standing up there, I just wanted to go, when we were talking about the staffing, the one part we didn't talk about was retirements and the changes in retirement, so I thought I'd go ahead and let her speak to the retirements, and then we can move on.
So looking at the slide, obviously, you can see comparison of 2019 beginning in June through September. We've presented the data and the breakout of instructional, classified, and admin for retirements, and you can see bottom shows the total. So last year, and not technically, just last calendar year, looking June through September, we had 70 retirements, and then this year we have 100. So we're up 30 retirements, and within that data, I know there was mention of early retirements. We did have about 6 individuals that chose to take an early retirement. A few of those were investment plans, so they were not subject to any penalty, but just a couple of them for approximately were subject to a slight penalty for retiring earlier than their normal retirement age. So just wanted to give you that bit of data. The numbers in September could possibly increase. We feel pretty good about August, but obviously somebody could come in tomorrow and say, I want to retire. So those numbers could certainly go up, and I suspect September may go up slightly too, just because people will have a little bit more time to think about it.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Thanks. So if Danielle wants to come back up, she can talk about the calendar committee and the convening of the calendar committee and their recommendations.
Sorry, I forgot I was there. So the calendar committee.
Wait 1 minute.
I'm really loud. I'm surprised I need mic'd. 3 kids at home. I feel like I'm always screaming. That being said, the Student Calendar Committee met and came to a consensus as to what they felt would be best for the 2021 school year. That being said, it was a start date of August 31st for students, concluding on June 11th. Several options were discussed and proposed, and this is what all of the committee felt would be the best to present to you all for approval. So I don't know how much detail you want me to go into. The slide talks about, with 5 additional days, the 196-day staff then has a 201-day school year. They would start on August 17th. The 186-day staff also has 5 additional days, making it a 191-day calendar, and they would start on August 24th. SSP 4s for training purposes have been approved for the 3 additional days. Their start date would be August 17th. I can answer questions, I can give more information, we can take this any direction you all feel would be best.
Let them ask questions.
Sure.
Eric?
Yeah, the first question is, teachers are asking on August, people have to report to August 17th, the ones that are high risk. Is there a way for them to report remotely?
I'm going to throw that your all's direction.
So we're asking every teacher to come to school, and they can be in their classrooms. We are looking at some virtual training, but they may want to get with their professional learning community of a few teachers and plan together. That's going to be a key part of what we're doing.
I was specifically asking about the high-risk teachers who don't want to be around other people. I don't know if I was clear about that.
You were. And we're still asking, I think that was, I know that was a point of contention with you the last meeting.
And it's still.
Yeah.
I'm consistent. Mitzi, can you remind me that there was somebody who came, was it 220 days?
The 220-day staff calendar, they returned on their normal return date of July 21st. And so by making the change to the calendar and adding 5 more days in the year that normally they would be off, they would end their year 5 days earlier.
And what they're saying to me is that normally they're there like a couple of weeks later to do grades and other things, and
They don't.
this is just what they said, that normally they have a lot of cleanup work to do after school year ends, and they don't think that they'll be able to do it all within the 5 days.
So there has been some contemplation about taking the days that they would normally work, which are the teacher professional days, and have them not work on those days, and then have 3 additional days at the end of the school year.
Right, that would be one way to sort of mitigate the fact that they conclude the same day as 196-day staff as it stands currently. Eric?
Okay. I would just relay in somebody's, but I do want to, going back to the conversation with Dr. Kingsley, I want to reiterate that if we have teachers who are at high risk, it makes absolutely, positively no sense to make them come into an environment that they shouldn't be going into because they are high risk. I don't understand that logic whatsoever. They're high risk and they want to stay at home because of quarantine. Having them come to school, work with peer groups is counter to everything that every medical professional is telling them. They're telling them they should quarantine and stay away from people. So we're asking for problems when that happens. And if a high-risk teacher, something happens to that person, and we had them come in, I mean, that's just going to be terrible. It's just going to be terrible, and I still don't understand the logic behind doing that.
So I'm just going to ask, because I know that that's something that maybe will be talked about with negotiations, right? Will that be something that can be addressed?
Well, let me throw something here. So I think, so as we look at the normal start to the school year, we've got a couple different classifications of teachers, right? We've got teachers who may be full remote. we've got concurrent teachers, and then we got teachers who just kind of regular brick and mortar type teachers. And I don't know that we know yet, and I guess I'm looking for nods on what that looks like at each school. My point of all that is, even in the cases where we've had, and we set in place a process by which if I was a teacher who had one of those underlying health conditions, I could request a waiver to get to one of those remote classes, so I didn't have anybody in front of me. Even in those cases, what we've asked is that those teachers do come in to the classroom and work from the classroom. And then potentially the discussion is, if I do have a remote class, there's a distinct possibility that as students want to come back to school, depending on what that grade level looks like and max class capacities for class size, I very much could start out as a remote teacher and then have some of my students who were once remote come into my class. And so I think that if we're talking about just pre-planning week with teachers, it's during the normal school year, they're going to be in anyway, because that's kind of the plan we've set in place. It's good to get everybody in, get everybody comfortable with the PPE, the work environment, the safety measures. So we've got a couple weeks to get everybody comfortable in that fact before students come back. So I guess, Mr. Robertson, that would be my response at this point.
I don't think it should be up to negotiations. It just at this point, it's common sense that someone's high risk to separate them. What about staff members? Let's take Kathy, or I don't want to take anybody. My mother's name is Phyllis. Let's take Phyllis. She has a job. She's able to do it remotely. She only needs to come into school, come into the work 2 days a week, but she's able to do her work 3 days remotely. Why would we not allow them to do a hybrid model if as long as they're able to function and do their work? Start that off first. If someone's able to perform their work up to the standard that we give them, why would we not let that person work remotely for a couple days a week?
So let me just ask a question. So are you talking about classroom teacher, or are you talking?
No, I'm not talking about classroom teacher.
Okay, so that's a great point, and certainly that's
only point I make.
And that's really our team, our cabinet, the team. Wider conversations with principals and administrators across the district. Certainly that's a conversation we've had a million times, and we feel there's no good place to land in terms of where we would with that for every individual. I'll tell you that the conversation always comes back to, we're going to have teachers on the front lines every day with students across the district. And how can we ask them to do that when Jody Dumas wouldn't have to come sit in an office where I can isolate myself in many cases for most of the day? So I think for us, it became out to a question of equity and really making sure that we know that our bus drivers, our custodians, our teachers, people that are on those front lines who can't work from home because they got to be providing that education for students, how could we differentiate for people who don't have that responsibility? So I think as a group, and I would ask for anybody else to jump in, that's where we kept coming back to and why we landed where we did.
So let me make sure I understand you. Let's take somebody at random. A guidance counselor at Southside has a child who has Hopkins disease, and she's worried about bringing something home to her son. She has to come to work, even though she could do her work from home a couple days a week to lessen her goal. You're saying you can't figure out the right thing to do. The right thing to do would be try to protect your employee. Because there are other people who do have to come there 5 days a week, and so you're going to make her come in and be a point of risk because there are other people who do have to come to school.
So you are absolutely having the same conversation with me right now that we've had as a team a million times.
But I'm coming to a different conclusion than you are, Jody. My conclusion is if someone's able to do their work. I want to keep our staff as safe as possible and educate our students as much as possible and cause the least amount of disruption. If it doesn't cause any disruption for them to work remotely, doesn't affect the educational outcome, and it increases the safety of the employee, if it matches all three of those things, but now you've created a different criteria, well, I'm worried about somebody over there saying, well, that's not fair, that person and I'm not, that's just,
listen, I think that's the complicated piece of this issue, and I think here's the question I would have of you, Mr. Robinson, is we will have undoubtedly somebody in that same position who cannot work from home. And so how do we, for one, say you may have that same type of condition, but you have to come in, but in this particular case you don't. And so I think that's what we've struggled with. Obviously, we all want to make sure our employees are safe, our students are safe. That's our primary concern. It's just struggling through those added complications that, as you are right now, that I am, we all have. There's not a good answer for some of these things, and I think that's, we're just being honest and telling you that's where we landed.
Oh, no, I'm not struggling,
Okay.
Jody. I'm not struggling. I think that the safety of the employees, if they're able to accomplish their goals and it increases the level of safety, that's not a struggle for me. It's a pretty crystal clear answer to me.
Eric, we've heard you. Shirley Brown.
One thing, I mean, I've heard from teachers too who said, well, I can't because I have to be home with this child who is high risk. And I'm like, well, then your high risk is going to be home remotely. Who is going to be monitoring that child remotely in his learning while you are over here doing your classroom? I mean, they have to be able to work. So if they're home and they split their time between an ailing relative or a high-risk relative, will they be giving their full time to the school? And that's something, too. It's not just, I want to work remotely. Can you give all that time remotely? And it does. It gets to be unfair. But back to the calendar. It looks like the students are coming back 3 weeks later.
Correct.
And they're coming, the school year will end 2 weeks later because we took off some days that we had normally scheduled them off, and that's November 23rd and 24th, the Monday and Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and then the February 12th, it was the day before. That was the day before the President's Day, so it would have been a 4-day weekend. Now it's back to a 3-day weekend.
Yes.
And then also there was those 2 days before the spring break, the 11th and the 12th, that we're taking off. So we made up 5 days by cutting them off. I see that we took some of the professional days and moved them up a couple of weeks because that's going to be in conjunction with when the period ends.
Yes.
So that even though we're starting 3 weeks later, we're ending only 2 weeks later. And I applaud you for being able to finagle that schedule to make that happen, because I know that, when the summer comes, we want to be there. The other thing is that teachers were asking, if you are going to be coming back to school, will there be a change in payroll, or will they be getting paid every 2 weeks like they are now?
Their pay won't change by bringing them back and making it a 201. So for a 196-day employee, it's actually 201 duty days. And for 186, it's 191 duty days. They'll all receive paychecks on the 31st, so there won't be any break in their paychecks.
And if they took a leave of absence, when will their last paycheck be?
August 15th.
Thank you.
I don't have a question for you, but I would like to tell you that I understand totally that you have worked very hard on this opening and closing of schools. And it's not your intent that anyone should be harmed, that you're looking out for the students and the teachers as best as you can and trying to take all the factors into consideration. And I greatly appreciate the time and the effort and the heart that you've put into this plan. So I don't want that to go unnoticed, and I certainly know that you're not trying to kill anyone, that you're doing the best that you can. So thank you very much for everything that you put into this plan. And thank you, Jody. Okay, let's move on.
Moving on. Okay, so now I think Denise is going to get up and start talking about our remote instruction and our equipment.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just very briefly, can you hear me? I just wanted to talk about the technical equipment and the changes for staff and teachers as we go to concurrent or remote learning. So right now, we have on order and will receive 2,500 cameras, stands, and microphones for the teachers so that they're able to do either concurrent or remote learning. And then for students, those that are in need, as you know, we had dispensed a number of computers in the spring. We gathered the majority of those computers back. So now we're looking at what will we do in the fall. So our equipment for children who are in need, we have about 380 laptops available for high school kids, 3,300 refresh laptops for elementary and middle, and 400 internet hotspots available at this time. These numbers are carefully calculated. We looked at what we had dispensed last year. We've looked at the survey results that have come in, and what's going on at the schools now as they reach out to additional families. And we believe that we will have enough to cover for those kids that have, based on what we knew in the past, who will ask, and are currently asking for this for the fall. And the 2,500 for the teachers will cover all the teachers.
The 400 internet hotspots that are available, Shelley Freeland Eddy wanted to know if there are any hotspots in the Newtown area, and if there were, to please let her know, because she would like to help us, or whatever help that she can give us.
That's wonderful. These hotspots are available to us free. It's an agreement with, I believe, Sprint. And so we'll have those available soon, but there's always a possibility of using more. I know we used approximately 600 in the spring.
Bridget?
Thank you. I know I've mentioned this a couple of times, and I appreciate this. My biggest concern, as I've talked about the one-to-one, and I understand where we have people choosing brick and mortar and then distance learning, but in the event there is a shutdown for whatever reason for the brick and mortar, those individual students have a laptop already assigned to them, and this is demonstrating over and above that. I just want to clarify.
So I think what you're asking is if we have a total shutdown and we have to have additional computers sent out into the field for students who wouldn't have asked for them otherwise, we do have laptops at the school that will be dispensed from the schools, and then we'll have collection devices. Now, the refresh laptops are, of course, those that we're taking out of circulation, that have been cleaned and are ready for distribution. But if there's additional needed, we do still have laptops and computers in the school that will then be dispensed from that school to their own students, should they need them.
Okay, because the in need is the part that I know I've had a lot of questions for, and I know sometimes we utilize the benchmark of free and reduced lunch or what have you. However, again, because if we go to distance learning, even though they chose brick and mortar, it's bell to bell, similar. It's not going to be similar to what it was ICANN. And most families, regardless of their free or reduced lunch or not, oftentimes don't have a device for each of their children. Mm-hmm. And that would be the expectation in order for them to have that continuity of instruction. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I do understand, and we have been thinking about that. We're thinking that we should be able to cover that if we dispense all of our computers from the schools out into the field, should that happen. And in need, we're not qualifying it based on free and reduced lunch. We're qualifying it based on the schools are working with these families, and if a child truly needs that computer, we will be giving it to them. And we do understand that it's per child, not per family.
And
Okay,
can I
very
just
good.
add
Thank
to that, Bridget? Denise's team added, 20% just to cover?
Yes.
In our numbers, we added 20% to cover for families who may be in need just because they need multiple devices.
Correct.
Thank you.
Shirley?
My question has to do with a lot of calls and emails I've received from teachers regarding the cameras in the classrooms. and that some teachers are going to be expected to do concurrent, I believe the language is, where they'll be teaching some students in their classroom and some students at home. Well, why can't you just have a class of remote and the rest of the classes in? They're saying, why am I asked to do both? And then, of course, there's all those privacy issues that they're talking about. And what if, the parents record this? Or, what if somebody is looking in on this? And there's just all kinds of privacy concerns and also how it's going to work. Is there anyone that can speak to those concerns?
With respect to the privacy issues, again, we are going to be informing parents whose children are engaged in remote learning that there is to be no recording audio or video of the feed, and we'll have them acknowledge that that's the rule to be followed. So we know that's something that's important to teachers and makes sense for a lot of different reasons. So that's going to be the directive, that if you're going to engage in remote learning, it's like you're sitting in a classroom and you're not recording it. I'll let somebody else answer the first part of the question.
So when you look at the little picture on the slide there, you can see the little camera on Denise's slide. That camera is really nimble and can be moved to face only the teacher and can be easily turned off. The speaker can easily be turned off. Teachers will have complete control of and easy control. We've shared it with several groups of administrators, and actually SCTA's representatives came, several other staff members, and went through it, and the consensus is it'll probably take our very tech-savvy teachers an hour to be able to figure out how to manage the camera and have complete control of what's happening in their classroom with that camera.
And that training will happen when they come back, right? Okay.
Yeah, and that's good. That's a good segue.
That was part of bringing them in early so that they would be prepared to do this.
I've already turned to page.
And it also, no, you can't because Eric still has to talk. I think the other benefit for this is that if a child is doing remote because he's with the same teacher, he or she is with the same teacher, that child can then come back to class at any time and be on track with the rest of his class, whereas before they wouldn't necessarily be.
And that
Eric?
was a very large criteria of the plan and the continuity of instruction that was given in the emergency order.
And I think having half a class with students and half a class at home might be sort of like that on-off thing. You only have half the students in a room potentially exposing you or being exposed. So I mean, I can see both ways on this.
Eric?
Well, kids being in virtual or not being virtual, does that affect class size at all? Is there still a class size limitation for virtual, the same amount as if they were brick and mortar?
For virtual or remote?
Remote, I'm sorry, remote.
Okay, 'cause
For remote learning, is there a class size, is the class size limitation
Yes,
the same?
yes.
So I want to just be a consistent person. So elementary school. Well, can you explain to me why at an elementary school you don't take all the people who are in brick and mortar, teach brick and mortar, and the people who want to be virtual, allow the elementary school teachers who are high risk to teach, I keep saying virtual, allow them to teach remote?
So what's happening right now is, as you know, we did a survey with the parents to find out remote and face-to-face or virtual. And now principals, for parents who didn't fill out the survey, principals have staff who are asking for those families to let them know. And hopefully by Friday, principals will have good data that will allow them to start creating class lists and schedules with kids. And so at that time, if they see that they have a teacher certified in an area where they may have 18 or 22 or 25 kids who are going remote, they may very likely ask teachers, who would like to teach remotely. It may be that that doesn't make sense at that school for whatever reason, and so there may be smatterings of kids at each grade level, and so principals will be asking teachers, will you teach concurrently? So where it works, they will be making that happen, but it's not as simple as here's 18 kids, and so we have someone who wants to teach remotely, you get the job.
Personally, I would think that I would prefer total remote, brick and mortar. I got to imagine that the way in which you deliver your curriculum depends on the medium in which you're delivering it. And so if you're asking someone to deliver the curriculum over two different mediums simultaneously, I would think that wouldn't be as optimal as asking someone to deliver curriculum over one single medium. Is that correct?
Well, we'll see after our really great week of training.
I think that brings us to the next page on the instructional training.
So can I go ahead? So, we just wanted to start out by being grateful to you all. It was a gift that you all gave to our administrators and to our staff to allow them this time for training. And I just want you to know that our teachers, at the end of it, I do believe they are going to have a lot of their questions answered. When you think about teachers, unlike essential personnel with nurses or doctors, they know what's in front of them. They know there's, the virus is in front of them. They know they have patients. Our staff are dealing a lot with fear that is of the unknown, which is, Hitchcock loved that kind of suspense and fear. But right now, it's not entertaining, and it's not good for any of us. Fear of the unknown is really challenging. And so this week of training is going to allow us to get teachers familiar with the equipment, get them working with their PLC to create really robust, rigorous lesson plans that they can count on each other, and God forbid someone gets ill, they still can count on each other for delivering instruction to their students. When they work with their panel and they work with the camera, our teachers are using their panels almost exclusively, using their panel. And this technology doesn't change that. It allows them to use their panel with what we're calling a film strip of whoever might be working remotely in a concurrent classroom. So the technology, I think, will really take a very short time during that week, and their collaborative planning and hopefully getting them over some of the fears they may be experiencing, that will take us through that week when they end up saying, I have products that are going to really help me get through this more easily. I think they'll be more confident. We'll address their fears. I've been collecting the fears that, questions that staff send, and we'll be addressing those in our training. I also just want to tell you, every single role in the district, every instructional role will have a calendar during that week of training. So they'll have links if it's remote. They'll be told where to go if they are working together. They will every role, psychologists that allow parents to understand what does it look like What does the technology look like? How can I support my child? And then through the first weeks, and hopefully that will grow, we are developing parent university classes that will allow a parent to have like a tip of the week and then build connections with small groups at their site. So we're looking forward to our counselors working with a team at the district to do that. I also would love to take a minute and just ask Steve and Chris to come up and just share a little about what they're seeing. Steve and Chris are going into every school, working with every administrator on what does it look like at the school and how can we support our administrators. And if they can just take a second to just share what you will about that.
Sure. Thank you, Laura. So we have asked every school, obviously, in preparation for this opening, to consider a number of factors that they need to be prepared for and develop a plan that we get with them and we review at the school site. I just worked with Riverview's team today, and we look at things, for instance, hallway patterns are critically important. We look at the cafeteria being at 50%, and how do you accommodate a school like Riverview High School with a cafeteria at 50%? We always use Riverview because it's our largest high school, so it creates the most complications. We look at making sure that when we look at classrooms, make sure that we create as much spacing as we can so everybody can stay as safe as possible. So there's numerous factors that we look at. We look at from the highest risk, working our way down to the lowest. Communication to the families, that's critically important that families understand what's going to happen when we open up. So we are meeting individually with each of our schools. I've completed about 2/3 of mine so far, and I have to say this. We have amazing instructional staff. Our teachers are incredible, but also it's important that we recognize the work that our administrators are doing, and they're under enormous pressure. This is a different opening than we've ever seen. We've talked about staffing. That's way up on their list, making sure that their numbers are accurate, but they're working that. They're doing a great job in very difficult circumstances, unlike they've ever seen before doing that. But they are really stepping up to the challenge. The plans are very complex, very detailed, and they are taking every consideration. They're thinking of every consideration possible to make sure that they're doing the best they can to keep their students, to keep their staff, and to keep everybody safe in those schools. So I have to say I'm incredibly proud of the work they're doing. The other thing I would like to say quickly is that, as they're working at the secondary level, looking at those, Eric was talking about the remote, Mr. Robinson. He always tells me to call him Mr. Robinson. So they're always looking at opportunities to create safe places in classes for the students as well as the teachers. And when you start looking at remote at secondary level, it looks very different than it does at the elementary. And there's two considerations I think is really important to think about. When I pull a group of students into a remote classroom, let's say we create a full remote teacher, and we'll have very few of those at the second. We knew it would be this way. We'll have very few. What you're typically doing, you're creating more preparation periods for the teacher. You're also creating more preparations for teachers that you're pulling those students out of in some cases, not all cases, but in most cases. The other thing you're doing that we have to be considerate of, and in our conversations, one-on-one conversations with teachers that the administrators are doing a great job of, when you pull students into a remote learning environment and putting more students in a regular classroom, so your face-to-face students, those numbers increase while your remote students are put into a separate situation. So most teachers are getting very comfortable with the conversation that they want to keep those numbers down in their classroom, a partial number of students remote and a partial number of students face-to-face. So the administrator is doing a great job, working very diligently. It's very complicated and complex, and I do want to give them a shout out for what they're doing. We're going to be ready, 100%. We're going to be ready, and they're doing everything they can to get there.
So I just want to say ditto to everything that Steve just said. Honestly, I just want to commend certainly district leadership as well, the teachers. They are just incredible. And I'm so excited about the training that they're going to receive because it is going to meet their needs. It's going to help them feel safe. It's going to help them feel comfortable, and it's going to provide answers to a lot of the questions. But those individual visits to the school, I haven't completed 2/3. We've got about, I had started with 23, 24 of them. So we're making our way through. But I can tell you right now, I just finished at Tatum yesterday, and I was at Englewood Elementary yesterday afternoon. And the administrators are collaborating like crazy, not only with their staff and their families. They've got task force built in their own campuses, so they're really asking for input, but they're talking across schools, across levels. What's working? What isn't? How are you planning on doing this? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Every school looks a little different. It's not one size fits all, but at the elementary, we're looking at things just like Mr. Robinson was talking about with the remote and the concurrent. Our hope is by Friday, we'll have some really solid data that we're going to be able to make those decisions. But in the meantime, administrators are talking and having individual conversations with teachers, grade levels of teachers, really trying to find out what's the best fit and match for the teachers to serve and support their students. So, arrival and dismissal, day one, week one, you can just imagine, with folks staying in their vehicles, trying to anticipate what's that going to look like, traffic patterns, et cetera. We just want to make sure that we have the best setup. But I can tell you right now, they are trying to anticipate every possible thing that may come up, looking at scenario after scenario, but they're working it, and they're working it together, and I just couldn't be more proud of what they're doing.
Thank you, Steve and Chris. We're in a workshop, so I can call you by your first name.
So thank you, Mitzi. So we've gotten a lot of questions about HVAC. Certainly, people want to know what's going on in terms of status. So a couple of things. We rely heavily on a group called ASHRAE, which is the Professional Association of HVAC Engineers, and they're always on the forefront of making sure that for mechanical equipment, they're providing the best advice to organizations throughout the country in terms of how to operate, run, and in terms of COVID-19, they've also done that. So we're really focusing on some of their recommendations. First and foremost is run time. They want to make sure that we are flushing classrooms as much as possible during the day, and so that includes adding run time to the school day. So our focus throughout the year typically is not only providing comfort in the classroom, but also focus on energy management. And so what we do to accommodate both of those goals at the same time is start as late as possible. Before teachers get there, get to the correct temperature when teachers are there, and then we end as quick as possible at the end of the school day. We will be maximizing that run schedule throughout the district, and so we will be starting as early as possible to get buildings flushed with clean air prior to staff arriving, prior to students arriving, and then at the end of the day, we will be running an extended day as much as possible to make sure that we are doing the same thing at the end of the day. So runtime is a big one. We've also, in terms of summer shutdown, typically we would not start until right before teachers come back. We are now in a full run schedule across the district with all of our HVAC equipment. That provides us added time this year to make sure our technicians can get around and we don't have any bugs when staff gets back, teachers get back, but also it starts that flushing process that earlier this year. The other critical piece that ASHRAE has recommended is maintaining space temperature and relative humidity. Relative humidity is critical in terms of spread of disease, virus, because if you get too low of a relative humidity, you dry out mucous membranes and people are more susceptible to picking up viruses. And if you get too humid, sometimes that can promote virus growth and movement in the classroom. So we need to make sure we're concentrate very heavily on that window this year to monitor both temp and relative humidity. The piece to balance with all that is bringing in as much outside air as possible. That's continually flushing the classroom with fresh air. Thank you certainly to the school board. It's been your vision over the last 10, 15 years to really provide funding for asset preservation and maintenance, and we've upgraded our systems throughout the district. So I can tell you we've got equipment, even though we've got newer equipment and some little older equipment, we are all capable on all of our equipment to bring in outside air. So we are looking at all those outside air settings, and we are going to maximize outside air into the classroom. So that is sometimes a delicate balance, because what that does is, as you bring in more outside air, that's more relative humidity, that's more temp that you got to deal with. And so if I had to give you an estimate, because I've been asked this question several times, every air handler is a little bit different, but in general, right now, we are probably flipping over classroom air 3 times within an hour. That's about where we are. In maximizing outside air, where we think we can potentially get without affecting our ability to control temperature and humidity within the space, we feel we can get to 6 exchanges of outside air within the hour. So that is really one of our focuses of our technicians right now, and our preventative maintenance team is making sure that we can get that outside air into the classrooms as most efficiently as possible. The other piece is filtration. And so another recommendation from ASHRAE is to, number one, make sure that all your filters are installed properly and they're functioning. That is also going on. We are currently running a MERV 8 filter. We moved to that a few years ago. MERV 8 is HEPA grade filter, like you'd see on a vacuum. Dust, pollen, anything of that nature gets captured in that particular type of a filter. Their recommendation is get to a MERV 13, which is virus grade. That's a significant upgrade. We have tested those. We have them in a building right now where we have tested them to make sure our equipment will accept MERV 13. It will. We can make it work. So we have given our vendor the go-ahead. We contract all of our filter changing out. We have given the go-ahead to purchase MERV 13 media, switch all of our filters out, and try to move in that direction as quickly as possible. I will say that MERV 13 filtration filters are not readily available. They're not typically used in schools and things of that nature, so supply is an issue. So we will have to keep everybody updated, but we are moving in that direction very, very quickly, as quick as we possibly can. Our team knows it's all hands on deck, even if we've got to assist with those filter change-outs. So that's where we are with HVAC. In terms of custodial, we spoke about this last time. Just to reiterate, we'll be moving an additional person onto days. We feel that's important. The day staff will be given priorities in terms of COVID-19 responsibilities, touch points, bathrooms, things of that nature, cafeteria doors, where students are going in and out, staff are going in and out. A lot of times that will be our focus during the student day. We are also going to ask that we can't clean everything. We just don't have the staff to do that. We certainly are going to make sure that all classrooms are outfitted with the correct cleaner, paper towels, to make sure they're assisting during the day with cleaning and sanitizing their own spaces. And so you're going to see a video later on down the road in another few weeks that helps us show teachers and students what that might look like. But again, during the day, it's going to be kind of all hands on deck to help us sanitize those buildings. At night, custodians will have a priority focus so that we are hitting the things that impact COVID-19 as much as possible on those night shifts. So that'll be our focus with custodial. The other thing, and I want to thank actually Mitzi and Dr. Asplin, who were forwarding me a bunch of items. One of the things that we've looked at is an antimicrobial spray, we've looked very closely at the one in particular that we're going to purchase. This is a spray-on product, and in most cases, I see it being used in vehicles where it's a virus protection, a bacteria protection for a number of months. And so we have pulled the trigger on a PO. We will be purchasing enough antimicrobial spray to be able to spray touch points across the district. That will provide, so when we talk about touch points, door handles, desktops, bathrooms, faucet handles, toilet handles, things of that nature. Even chairs can be sprayed. That provides an extra layer of protection that is continually killing viruses as a virus lands on that surface for 90 days. So we've purchased 2 rounds of spraying with that antimicrobial. We'll be moving in that direction to get everything sprayed prior to when students return. And we think that given that how that fits in with our custodial cleaning program, that as good as we are and as much as we preach, this is what we do on a nightly basis. There's always a room for a little bit of human error. This is an added layer of protection across the district for those surfaces. So we'll be adding that to the package this year for all of our sites. So we're very, very happy with that.
Jane?
I just wanted to reiterate one thing, Jody. I happened to see attend a webinar based on music programs, blowing of horns, trombones, clarinets, and voice, and it was quite interesting. And I've spoken to Mr. Dubert at Riverview. He has witnessed that. I also furnished that to James Slayton, thinking that he and his football team might like to pursue this. No, I think he's distributed it as well, but I don't know if you've seen it, but there are some particular things that will need to be done to play music inside, to do voice and chorus inside, and the air conditioning units and the filtration and the supply of fresh air, and then having the room sit vacant for a while before the next class comes in. So I just would say to look to some of those folks for that, because I think that will impact how we can start up this fall.
Absolutely, will do.
Eric?
So I was able to do 2 work days last week. One was, as Jody knows, one was in the plumbing department with and then one was with air conditioning with Noggin and Jesse. And so they had talked about that we were looking at UV, that we were evaluating, not that they were doing it, but they thought that we were evaluating UV and ionization. Is that being put on the wayside for the MERS one that you talked about?
So, Mr. Robinson, I appreciate that, and I'll have you know that on the mornings I call into facilities and we do Zoom meetings to see what's going on. I was talking to facility manager, and then Eric popped in on the video at 7 o'clock in the morning, so I appreciate that very much. But Mr. Robinson's exactly right. We are also we've looked at UV before technology. We never moved in that direction just because of the added cost, and we didn't think we could see the cost benefit. However, in this environment, we're re-looking at that issue, and so we've got some costs that have been assembled in terms of what that might look like for each of our air handlers. But we're also looking at a new technology, which is basically ionization, ozone being put into your air handlers, and that also will kill viruses and bacteria. So both of those technologies will not be ready to start school, even if the board said, yeah, we want to do that. We just could not get that done just because of the amount of air handlers we have and the engineering it's going to take to get that in place. But we are running some tests at a few schools. In both of those cases, it'll be a significant investment, not only up front in the capital cost, but in the ongoing maintenance to make sure those systems are working. So we've got our indoor industrial hygienist, air quality expert on board, and as we install those systems, we're doing some air monitoring so we can kind of see what kind of impact are we having with these systems. So if we do elect to consider these, we want to make sure that we have a long-term impact, because it will be significant capital investment and ongoing maintenance throughout the district. So you're exactly right. They won't be ready to start school, but we're looking at those technologies.
Right. And I was with them. They did Venice High, Lower Nokomis, and Venice Al, and it was a rather involved process. I've heard teachers wanting to talk about putting some UV filters or lights or some sort of portable device in their classrooms. Is that something the school district would supply, or they would have to supply, or?
So currently, it's not in our plan to supply. However, we have had requests. We get those requests every year, and typically we have said, in many cases, unless there was a specific health issue with a teacher or a student, we've tried to say no, because we believe our environments are very, very healthy. We've taken a different approach this year and said that, okay, if teachers want to bring or students want to bring something in, like an air purifier, we're going to allow that to happen. Every person reacts differently to whatever is going on in an environment, so we'll let it happen. If we get complaints, then we'll have to come in and take a look at what that item looks like. But we are going to allow those things to come into school, given the COVID-19.
No, I was going to ask. I don't think the question was whether they could bring them in. The question was, is the school district going to be providing them?
So currently, that's not in our plan to provide anything as a room unit to go ahead and purify air.
So do we have any ADA responsibilities, or somebody is sick and we'll put them in an environment that could cause them illness? Do we have any responsibility to make accommodations?
We do in some cases, and so Mr. Hardy has actually worked with Al Haredi on this process. So if we get employee or student who has some sort of a disability and wants to look at it in terms of ADA, we've got a process by which we sit down with them, have a conversation about what those accommodations might look like, and try to make sure we at least consider what we can do to accommodate that person. In every case, that may be a little bit different, but yeah, so we have a process in place, and we will make sure that we have those conversations to see if there's any accommodation we can make for people who have true ADA issues.
Thank you, Mr. Dumont.
Shirley?
Yes, I too was looking at those HEPA filters and the UV lights and the ionization. I would like us to prioritize that, if in fact, they come through with the second phase of funding that they're looking at giving schools, from the federal government. But I know that we probably have to start ordering and looking at those things now because everybody's bought up what's available. Another issue that I have is the hand sanitizer and how it's flammable. I mean, I've heard that there's been some accidents when somebody has wiped their hands and then lit a cigarette. Are we going to be doing some training with our staff about not doing certain things if they've got the hand sanitizer around them?
That's a great question. We have been getting it quite a bit, and one of the things that we're going to do for all staff is the first day they come back, I know we're working with Dr. Kingsley and her team, is to provide that safety training, and certainly hand sanitizer is one of the things we need to talk about. Yes, we are in many cases going to have, one of the things we always in fire code get written up for is having too much hand sanitizer, alcohol-based hand sanitizer in classrooms. This is a good example of where what we're doing with COVID-19 is not going to match with other policies, safety procedures, things that are going on. So that's one of the things we're going to have to grapple with is how the two of those meet.
Well, will the fire department give us slack on that this year? Because they're the ones who, got after the kindergarten teachers last year about it.
So we're certainly having those conversations now, and those are some of the things we're working through. So it's items like that. It's fire drills. How do we complete a fire drill but not have all the students crowd into the hallways and go out at the same time? I know we've made some progress with our lockdown drills and making sure we don't have all the kids getting into a safe corner. There's some alternative ways that we can do that, and Tim's going to provide some coaching for teachers on how to do that without getting into that safe corner. So all ongoing conversations, but we're going to have to rectify and come to some conclusion where we have conflicting policies, procedures, state requirements. We're going to have to figure out a way around those.
And I know we can't possibly put something in everyone's room. My daughter, gets her chemo every 3 months, and so we just bought something for her classroom. So I'm glad you're allowing that. But I would really like us to look at Oak Park and in the autistic area, pullouts and those things like that, those high-risk places for those students. If let's prioritize those. When we can get that equipment in there and see if we can, because, that's needed not only for those students, but for the staff that's working with them, because, some of these other things just aren't as good, and some of those kids can't wear the masks.
Point well taken. If we decide to go in one of these directions with one of those technologies, we certainly will have to prioritize. We just have so many hair handles across the district, it would take us a year to get through them. So we will have to prioritize a plan. Again, we want to really evaluate what kind of an impact are we having through some actual indoor air quality testing with them. But point well taken.
And that's something too, like if a parent or someone says, well, my child can't wear a mask, well, maybe what you need to do then is, supply an air handler for the rest of the kids in the room. I don't know. But, I think those are things that we have to look at.
Okay, moving on, please. Missy, is your mic on?
Of course not. So Craig is going to come and speak with you about the communications tools and videos. They've been working on communications, have been doing a great job, and kind of a yeoman's effort here on their part. So
I know he's been sitting there patiently waiting.
That's what I do best. So thank you for the opportunity. As many of you can imagine, to communicate something that's never been done before is not easy, as it is opening a school system for everybody in the room. So listening to what we heard today, what we tried to do over the last several months as we work through this is come up with some tools for our educators to look at and our staff members and obviously our parents, so to kind of relax some of the fears that are coming into. So we have created a 7-part series of videos, of which we have 3 today. But before we go to that, we also did these 2 guides, which you all have, on return to learn and return to work. And basically one is for parents and students to read, which kind of encapsulates everything we've talked about today, meaning that what's safety, when do you wear your mask, how's the cafeteria going to look, how do I get water, when do I get out of my car, can I get out of my car? And so we've tried to put together what is the most popular questions we've been receiving and have answers to them for the parents, and it's kind of a small little guide for them. And then we did the same thing for the return to work, which is a guide which talks about how we got here, which tells us that we had an order from by the Commissioner Corcoran telling us that we had to open. And it's kind of a step-by-step of what is it going to look like when you come back to school. How safe is it? So we talk about what Mr. Dumas talked about earlier. We talk about the touch cleaning points. We talk about this new chemical that we're going to put down that protects for up to 90 days possibly. We talk about a few other things in here. We have checklists in here. So we're going to probably talk about that a little bit more after this presentation, but there are checklists in here for when do I send my kid to school, when can't I, just, or when do I come to work, when do I allow someone in the building. So there's just little outlines here, which is pretty common throughout all of the world right now, that you can't go anywhere, you can't go to a doctor without answering a few questions. We've also put in some my personal work area and space, and how do I clean that? When am I expected to clean? All these things were covered by someone in this room at some point today, and again, the Cabinet's been talking about these things for the last several months, which is kind of encapsulates our whole plan. Then we have a whole section here on leave, which will talk you through with a nice chart. What happens if I get sick, if I get sick and we close down a school or a building? It talks about what are you going to do? Who do you contact? What happens next? So, and then of course the big issue is privacy, and we're all familiar with privacy and what we're going to do as a district to kind of keep your stuff, your information private as possible. But going over to the video, again, we do have 7 videos we're in the works of making right now. 3 of them are done. One's on PPE, what we actually have, how do you get it. One's on safety, how do I actually put the PPE on, how do I wear it, what's it protecting. And then we have one on contract tracing, which we were all able to get completed for this board meeting. The follow-up ones are instructional, which is going to be talking about concurrent learning, and that's going to be with Dr. Kingsley. We're going to film that Thursday. We hope to have that out on the 10th. Facilities, which we're actually shooting today, and that's going to talk about what Mr. Dumas talked about earlier, about what's expected from a teacher or someone in the classroom, how we're going to clean these areas throughout the day, and how does that look. We have one on food and nutrition services, which is going to star Sarah Dan, and it's going to talk about how does the cafeteria line look? How do I pay? When do I take my mask off to eat? How am I going to sit? Can I sit next to someone? What's the tables going to look like? So, and then we have the final one on transportation, which is going to talk about the hand sanitizers on the bus attendant cleaning between routes, constant and clean. So our goal was to show that we're not sitting back, that your safety is our utmost concern, but we don't want to tell you, we want to show you. We want to be there for you. So right now, if we could, we'll flip over and play the videos. They're about 3 minutes each, but I think they're pretty important for you to see because they all go up tomorrow morning.
My name is Jody Dumas. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Sarasota County Schools, and I'm here today to talk to you about personal protective equipment and what we're doing for all of our employees throughout the district to make sure we can come back to school in a safe environment for not only students, but for our team of talented individuals that teach classes on a daily basis. In terms of personal protective equipment, we really tried to run the gamut of everything that our employees could need throughout the day in a classroom setting or in their work setting. We've got all types of face masks that we run into our warehouse that are available to employees, from cloth face masks to disposable face masks, some adjustable face masks. We want to make sure employees are comfortable wearing a face mask because at the end of the day, we know a face mask is one of the most important pieces of PPE that an employee can wear in a work environment. Some employees may want to wear not only the face mask, but a face shield and in addition to that. If they elect to do that, we have that and can provide that to them. We're also requiring a face covering of all students. But in addition to that, we've purchased for every student a desk shield. That's going to go on every student's desk. And that just provides an extra layer of protection so that should a student sneeze or cough, that shield is going to help provide extra protection. We've also purchased some trifold desk shields that we can give to social workers and psychologists. We've got those available, so you make sure you've got that extra barrier of protection between you and whoever you're working with. We've got gloves stocked in the warehouse. We also have stocked gowns. So in terms of some positions, like an ESEA that has to come in close contact with a student, they might elect to wear a gown during the day. We've also got hand sanitizer in every space throughout the district. Certainly we want to encourage hand washing as being the primary way to do that throughout the day. But if you're not next to a bathroom, the hand sanitizer is the next best thing. We also have Alpha, our disinfectant, located in every space in the district, whether it's an office or a classroom. We're providing that to employees so that they continually disinfect their space throughout the day. At all of our school sites, we've got a single point of entry, and we know that as we come into that front office area, parents are going to be contained. They're going to have to make appointments to come in. So we've got those protectants for our employees who are up right in those front office areas. One of the things we really want to focus on is social distancing. No matter what type of PPE you have on, we feel that trying to maintain a safe distance between other employees, other teachers, students, really needs to be the focus throughout our day. We know that's not going to be easy, and that's why face coverings are so important, particularly face masks. So how do you get this PPE if you run short in your classroom? We're fully stocked in our warehouse. All of your bookkeepers at all of your sites have a COVID-19 order form coming from the warehouse. And so what you would do is you communicate to your bookkeeper at your site that you need masks, you need face shields, you need gowns, whatever it is you think you need that we have. The bookkeeper will order it directly from our warehouse. It'll be shipped over to your site and be delivered to you. One of the biggest things we know with personal protective equipment is it's got to be used properly, it's got to be fitted properly for it to be effective. So the first day or two of your return to work is going to be focused on safety and training and how to use PPE properly. We want to make sure that not only do you have it, but it's fitted well to you, you know how to use it, and you're protecting yourself as well as everybody in your classroom. Our promise as a school district is to make sure we're doing everything we can to make those environments as students come back to school and teachers come back to teach as safe as possible.
There's another one here.
Several takes on that.
You must have worked hard that day, didn't get a chance to shave.
Okay, so the video, go ahead. In the studio, go ahead and go up to just for the videos to play.
I'm Susie DeBose, and I'm the Health Services Supervisor for Sarasota County Schools. I'm here today to talk a little bit about the safety measures that we're putting in place so that we can welcome everyone back to the school and work sites and keep them healthy and safe. When we're looking at risk associated with COVID transmission, COVID is primarily a respiratory disease and can be spread by people who do not have symptoms and do not know that they are infected. CDC recommends all people 2 years of age and older wear a cloth face covering in public settings and when around people who don't live in your household, especially when other social distancing measures are difficult to maintain. Our school board has passed a policy that requires all students and staff to wear a face covering. So if you are students or a staff member in a classroom, you are wearing a face covering. If you are a staff member that has a private cubicle or office space, you are permitted to remove the face covering, but we ask that when you transition to another space or you walk out of your area, that you put that face covering back on. Wear a face covering that covers your nose and mouth to help protect others in case you're infected with COVID-19 but don't have symptoms. Mask is one such face covering. Masks can prevent you from touching your face and can be a visual reminder to practice social distancing. Wear a face covering correctly for maximum protection. Don't put the face covering around your neck or up on your forehead. Don't touch the face covering, and if you do, wash your hands or use hand sanitizer to disinfect. All staff will be provided with cloth masks in a pack of 5 so that they have one for every day of the work week. Before you put your mask on, wash your hands, and if soap and water are not available, use hand sanitizer. Pick up the mask by the loops, carefully loop the straps over your ears and make sure the mask fits. When removing the mask, grab it by the loops, pull it away from your face, careful not to touch your face, or have shields available for staff. The CDC does not recommend a shield as a replacement for a mask. Unless it goes below your chin and wraps around your head, they recommend a mask as well as a shield. The district is requesting that all students and staff wear a face covering. If a student is more comfortable with a shield versus a mask versus a gaiter or scarf that they can pull up, those are all options. A mask may be the difference between exclusion and being able to continue with your daily routine. If you are wearing a mask and maintaining social distancing, then you are at lower risk of transmission than the person who is not wearing a face covering.
And thank you to Susie over here, our star of that one. And we have one final one that's ready to go up for tomorrow, and this one is probably one of the most important ones because it's about the contract tracing, and again stars Mr. Dumas. So.
In our response to COVID-19, certainly one of the most important aspects of our being prepared to have students and staff return is identification of possible COVID-19 cases within our school and being able to contact trace as quickly as possible. We in constant contact with the Sarasota Department of Health. They've been involved in our process from day one and have approved where we are at this current point, which is what we're going to roll out as staff and students come back.
We're asking parents and guardians to work with us as a team to make sure that all of us are safe. We ask families that if someone is sick, stay home. If we do have a situation on campus where a student presents symptoms similar to COVID, we will bring that student to the clinic and isolate them. We have evaluated our spaces so that we have enough room to isolate those students that might be symptomatic and keep an eye on them until their parents or guardians are able to get to the school and pick them up. If it turns out that we have a positive diagnosis, then the Department of Health, the administrative offices of the school district, the landings, and the school site will work quickly and thoroughly to notify families or anyone that is at risk or involved.
We've developed an online form that feeds into a database that all staff and students will be tracked on. As soon as symptoms of COVID-19 appear in a student or staff member or a report of COVID-19, a clinic aide, a nurse, an assistant principal or principal will have access to the form. That starts our process. Back at the landings, we've got teams of people who are identified to respond to these reports. So some information gets input into that form. That report automatically notifies a team lead, a case manager. Our teams of response people are working with the sites to determine very quickly what that looks like in terms of exposure at a site. At this point, we will bring the Department of Health into the mix and we will discuss what's going on in this particular case. They will make determinations for us in terms of, does anybody have to be excluded from school? And if they do, for how long do they need to be excluded? Once that determination is made by our team and by the Department of Health, we will then communicate back to everybody involved in that case, whether it's students in a class, teachers. We will communicate directly to them in terms of, do they need to go home for 14 days? Do they need to stay at work? Do they need to make sure they're wearing that face mask? That'll all come directly from the team. In addition to that, we will have a communication that goes out to that school or to that department that identifies what's the case look like and make sure we're reassuring people that we have addressed it with everybody affected and we're returning back to business as normal tomorrow. If that changes, or if we have to close a classroom, if we have to close a building at a school, or if we have to close an entire school, we will be working very closely with the health department to make that determination, and we will communicate that out as soon as we have that information. A key factor in all of this is we're going to provide a list of common COVID-19 symptoms, and we're going to ask parents, please, if your student is experiencing any of these symptoms, don't put them on a bus, don't bring them to the bus stop, don't bring them to school. That's our first line of defense in making sure we keep students who do come to school and who are healthy safe.
Good job.
So we've been pretty busy, as you all can tell, and thank you for the opportunity to do this, but my staff has really been working incredibly hard, and my hat's off to them, and they respond to everybody. We get calls throughout the night from school board members, everybody, and we try to jump on it right away. That's what we're here for, is make sure that everybody understands we're trying to do something safe for our schools. So any questions about any of this?
I would just add quickly, and thank you guys for coming, our 3 case managers who are going to be managing this process in terms of COVID-19 are Aaron, Karen from the health department, and Susie are in the back, and so they're going to be taking on this daunting task of making sure we're tracking this down as quickly as possible and working with Department of Health. So thank you guys for coming. We appreciate you helping us out.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks all of you for all your hard work, and the videos are great, and the instructions sheets that you've made up, brochures, are also fantastic. Good job, Craig. We have no questions, so we have 10 minutes before our 3 o'clock board meeting.
Nope, there's just one more quick slide. It's
during the meeting.
There's just, the only slide that was left is, I just wanted to provide the board with the update on how much we've spent today in response to COVID-19. And again, this will, this is as of July 31st. But to date, just over $6.2 million has been spent on COVID-related items. We have, in addition now, this does not include the $5.6 million for the additional 5 training days. It doesn't include the $59,000 for the microbial cleaner.
And shortfall on FTEs?
I'm sorry?
The shortfall on FTEs?
Well, and it does not include revenue shortfalls. It just includes expenditures today. And the PPE, we're still hoping to be able to receive FEMA reimbursement on. So, but I just wanted you to have that.
What was that other figure you gave us, 5.6 million?
Is the additional 5 duty days.
And then you gave us something after that.
59,000 for the antimicrobial cleaner.
Thank you.
That Jody just ordered yesterday.
Okay. Thank you, Mitzi. Thank you, everyone, for, excuse me. I'm not sick. I just have something in my throat.
God, is he sucking up to the teeth.
It's a little tense today. Just what we needed. Good going, John. You woke us up. I'd like to call this meeting together, please. And I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome you all to the school board meeting this Tuesday, August the 4th. Please stand for the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Me?
Mrs. Corcoran.
Okay.
No. We would like to present you with something for, who has the card? Who has the card?
I'm sorry.
Who has the card? Well, there is a card floating around. It's in the bag.
It's in the bag.
We would like to thank you for leading us during this time. Don't look at me.
No, thank you.
We really appreciate it. Look at that.
Well, thank you so very much.
There you go.
Elbow. There we go. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Another presentation.
Oh my goodness, great.
It's something you'll love that will relax you.
Okay. Oh my goodness gracious. Oh, thank you. Oh my goodness gracious, look at this. How am I gonna even put this up here? Thank God.
Whoa, those are beautiful.
Oh.
All of cabinet is not here right now, but they're there.
No, they are. So, thank you guys
Yes.
so much. Very, very nice. Very nice. Very humbled. Thank you.
Well, I know when you took the job, you didn't know what it was going to be turning into, but you've kept a level head through these really uncharted times, and thank you so much for all your leadership, and I can't imagine how many sleepless nights you've had.
Well, I know I called and she's still there at 7 and it's 7:30. Jane, this is good.
Well, I too want to say thank you. I mean, you took this on with a lot of energy and drive, and even when it wasn't always convenient with you and your life, your personal life, with a new baby, a new grandchild, you never missed a beat. And for that, we will never forget you for all that you've done. You're in drop, and in a couple of years, 3 years, you'll be going away, but I'm glad that we have you. Glad that we've had you as interim superintendent, and really we appreciate everything you've done. You've done it and done a great deal, and you've been responsive, and you've handled a lot of things that you shouldn't have had to handle, but thank you immensely.
Thank you very much.
Mrs. Ziegler.
Well, I agree. I say that you stepped up in a time when we really needed someone with a level head and a calm tenor. And you had, of course, we didn't know what was before us, and you had probably the most memorable 10 months of your life. But I'm forever grateful for the work that you've done for this community, for this school district. So again, I really, really do appreciate everything you've done for us and been here for us. So thank you.
Mr. Robinson.
Yeah, Mitzi, I'm sure when you started, it was tumultuous. You're like, oh, well, the waters will be calming now. Little did you know. And but you were able to, guide the district through one of the most weirdest times, craziest times. And just when you thought it was over, it started back up again. with the second wave, and you were able to, guide the ship through COVID, through, superintendent search, through a new superintendent search, through a new wave of superintendent search, through distance learning, remote learning, budget crisis. So thank you very much, Mitzi.
Thank you all very much. It's very humbling. And I very much appreciate that you trusted me to take on this role. And it was definitely a little bit more than I had bargained for. But and I'm very grateful that Brendan is packing and getting ready to drive over. so I'm very much looking forward to his arrival. I think he is going to do a great job, and we're very much looking forward to his new tenure here as our superintendent. The only other thing I really wanted to talk about was to brag a bit on our teachers. During the last couple of weeks, we had an ESE Institute, some technology trainings, and teachers voluntarily participated in the Power Up Blackboard course. We had about 1,888 teachers. In total, we had about 2,598 trainings for teachers, teachers have participated in, but some were more than one or another. But again, it is supposed to be their summer vacation, so this just shows you how dedicated our staff are in making sure that they're going to have every tool in their toolbox for us to be successful when we open. So I'm very grateful for that. And that's really all I had. So my last superintendent's report. So thank you very much.
Eric, did you want to speak? My note says here to ask Laura Kingsley to come forward.
Oh, she did. I think that.
Okay. Just checking.
Okay, no problem.
Over here.
No. All right, our hearing of citizens is next. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to speak. When the time flashes yellow, 1 minute remains, and you need to begin to summarize, and you must stop speaking when the buzzer rings. Please note that respect for divergent viewpoints and civility will be shown at every board meeting. Whether you agree or disagree with the speaker, you should listen politely and respectfully without making any sounds of approval or disapproval, including cheering. My first speaker is Wilson Pavis, or Pava.
Actually, give me one quick second.
Well, as a substitute teacher, I want to pile on the praise for Ms. Corcoran.
Yeah.
The leadership that you have provided, up on down from where your office is, all the way through campus administrators to teachers and to substitutes like me, has been incredible since you've taken control. So props for sure. Normally I come with righteous indignation and kind of wag my finger at y'all, but today I actually want to kind of give y'all some praise. What y'all did at the last board meeting and what I hope that y'all do today with face masks and requiring them is a step in the right direction. There's still work to be done. There's still a lot of things that need to be solved, such as cameras and teacher issues like that, and then also health issues like are we ready to go back at a snap like that if we have a second wave? But what you guys have demonstrated recently is that you can do this, even though a lot of us thought you couldn't. I'll be honest with you on that point. And keep that work up. However, I do want to say one thing on the masks. As a substitute teacher, I've been in middle schools, I've been in elementary schools, and I spent most of my time in high schools. And what this reminds me the most of is dress code. Back when I was a student, I remember people getting dress coded pretty frequently. But having come back and seen it from the perspective of a teacher and a substitute teacher, I realized that it's gone down. Most of the times, we've come around to the realization that we're here to learn, and, how you're dressed normally doesn't affect that. And normally the moments when people don't follow the dress code are not too out there, and so you let them slide. My fear is that that's what's going to happen with masks. That a student will come up with a mask like this, or a mask like, well, there go my glasses, or a mask like this, or they'll go like this, or they'll come into class with it on, and then in the process they'll just tear it down and not continue to use it, and things like that. The enforcement issue of it is very concerning. And not just that, but when we also take into consideration things like class changes. There were pictures coming out of Georgia recently that looked pretty much like Riverview High School's third floor back when I was a student and back when I was a substitute there, right? Where it's just crowds and crowds and crowds. So when we're talking about reopening, it's very important that we not just talk about masks and making sure that people are using them, but how we're going to enforce that and what the consequences are going to be. Personally, I think of it like this. If you're not wearing a mask, you're endangering others, and you should get a referral. And that's the type of guidance that y'all should be giving, so that teachers aren't left wondering, like, okay, is this worth sending them to the office? Is this worth interrupting class time? Is this worth disrupting other students? Because at the end of the day, our safety and our health is worth doing that. And so y'all need to start providing very clear guidance that takes this issue as seriously as it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. David Graham.
Good afternoon, everybody. And I just wanted to say, Ms. Cochran, thank you so much for the excellent work you've done. Being an employee and seeing the difference over the last 8 months has been just an absolute pleasure, and a lot of it has to do with you, so thank you very much. To my fellow board members, as an employee, as you heard the cars circling the parking lot over the last hour, I've received hundreds of emails, phone calls, and letters from our employees, our staff, and our teachers. They are afraid. They are afraid for their health. They are afraid for their students, and they're just scared. A lot of it is not factual based. A lot of it is the unknowns that we've all talked about over the last few months. But in many, many cases, they were also afraid because of the timing of the LOA. Because the LOA date was moved to the 31st, and this meeting and this agenda item was moved to the 4th, a number of people in the 30, 40, 50 employees felt necessary to go ahead and put in a leave or put in a retirement because they felt like if I don't do it on the 31st, I lose my opportunity to do that. So I'm hoping that based on the rules and the mandates we have, that we can have some flexibility with the bargaining to extend that maybe a few more days, so that I believe we can recover some of the people that made the decision to go ahead and take a leave early because they felt like if they didn't do it last Friday, they were out of luck. So I'm hoping we can retain them. The bus drivers especially have a lot of concerns about, although they understand the PPE and the procedures we're doing, putting 30-plus children in the bus at the same time, they have a limited ability because of federal and state transportation mandates. They can't have Lysol in the car. They can't have certain other disinfectants that they would be much more comfortable with because they can't have aerosols and those types of equipment in the car. So although I talked to the transportation department and I do understand that we're giving them the zero res and other types of disinfectants, there's a fear there also. Fear of spread between the students and the driver, or the driver and all of a sudden 30 or more students. As we saw in Gwinnett County, Georgia this last week, they had a single meeting and 262 teachers now have to quarantine for 14 days. My greatest fear is we open on the 31st, and in 3 weeks, we have to shut everything down again.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. It's great to see everybody.
Thank you. Natalia Gonzalez. I know I butchered your first name, but I can't read it.
It's Natasha, by the way. Good afternoon. First of all, thank you all for what you are doing, because it's a daunting task what you guys are having to do. And thank you. It's a hard job. You know, and sometimes we might be on different sides of opinion, but bottom line is that we are all in this together for the kids, okay? My question is, the first day of school, okay? The first day of school, when kids show up to brick and mortar with the school supplies, normally it's 2 reams of paper, 4 boxes of tissue paper, 4 bottles of hand sanitizer, Lysol wipes. It's a hefty thing that parents drop off their kids and take it to the classroom because, especially in elementary, the kids cannot bring that in. Has there been given any thought in regards to what that first day of school is going to look like, considering that parents cannot go into the school? That was my first observation. My second is, and this is from a risk manager side of view, because I'm a risk manager. What are the procedures and protocols, and how are they going to be documented in regards to the cleaning of the classroom, the high contact areas, the various things? Because if a teacher gets infected with COVID, and that documentation is not there in place and it's not consistent, because you can't have documentation one way one day and then the next day another day. It has to be consistent. You're looking at a work comp exposure here, okay? I understand that, you know, you guys are a municipality, you are self-insured, but there's other levels of insurance, as I know because I deal with the Miami School District, of levels of insurance. I know that you have a TPA, which is probably Gallagher Bassett, if I was to guess. Have they been assisting you in regards to what is the protocol that they are looking at and what they're going to need to be able to defend a COVID case? Because saying, prove to me that you got it here at the school, I'm going to turn around and say, prove that I didn't get it in the school when my class of 10 kids are now positive. Okay, and contact tracing. That's gonna also be key here when it comes to the work comp aspect of it. My other comment is in regards to the emotional.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Dumas, could you go out in the hallway, please, and talk with this lady? It's either you or Mrs. King, Dr. Kingsley, either one of you. There's no other hearing of citizens. There's no one else. That concludes our hearing of citizens. That concludes our hearing of citizens.
FSU, huh?
That's fine.
We've got FSU masks.
I know, that's it. That's it.
I was there.
That's it.
Come on. Are there any additions or to the consent agenda?
Yes, there is an addendum on the instructional classified personnel report that was added last Friday, and there's an approval to revise the job description for the Executive Director of Human Resources. Dr. Asplund has asked that we re-advertise that position.
Thank you. May I have a motion, please?
I move for approval of the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Please vote. Wait, well, Bridget voted already.
I haven't.
No,
It's not come up.
It's not coming up. Here we go.
Oh, I'm on the workshop, that's why. Just a minute. I'll be there with you, just a minute.
Passes 5-0.
I have it up here, but I can't. Okay, Jim.
Actually, that's Shirley that's approved. It's Jane and, right? It says Jane and Caroline. Mrs. Goodwin and Mrs. Zucker.
Yeah, my vote thing isn't coming up.
It says you voted.
No.
Perhaps we should do a voice vote.
No, hang on. We're almost there. Okay.
So do you think they have their switch?
The right agenda first.
I can't see it that far.
It says Mrs. Goodwin has not voted.
Mrs. Goodwin, you have not voted?
I've already voted. So I'm concerned that they may be
Yeah,
switched.
my vote isn't coming up.
All right, let's do a voice vote then until staff fixes this. All those in favor of approval of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, likewise. So the motion passes 5-0. I'm waiting. Are we all right?
Yep.
Okay. May I have a motion on item 8, please? On item 41. Pardon me?
Motion carried 5-0.
I said that. The motion, yeah, I did. The motion carries 5-0.
Okay.
Item 41.
I move for approval of the new job description, Professional Development Coordinator, as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
Well, I'm just glad we're waiting until we get our new superintendent to hire this important position.
So am I. Okay. This thing is still not working. To vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Is Bridget on?
Is Bridget? I didn't hear her.
She's in the chat.
Can you see her vote?
Bridget, you appear to be muted.
Oh, she is muted.
Me to electronically vote? It wasn't coming up.
The electronic voting is not working, so we're doing a voice vote on number 41.
Okay, so that's an affirmative yes to that.
Okay. So the vote is 5-0, and it passes unanimously.
I move that item 42, I move that the board approve the dual enrollment memorandum of agreement between the University of South Florida and the School Board of Sarasota as presented.
Second.
On the discussion, Mrs. Goodwin?
Well, I just want to say that, the University of South Florida is a great partner with us. They're offering us several alternatives, which we haven't had before from one of the state university systems. We've had dual enrollment agreements with Community College / State College of Florida, but I think this brings us to another level in terms of coursework that students tell us they really need. So on the shorter end, which it shows most of the core courses that we've looked at before, I still think there's some merit of enrichment and rigor there. So I'm just delighted with this agreement. It's an agreement for 1 year, and we hope that it all works out really well.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And the chair votes aye, and the motion passes 5-0. Item 43.
I move that the board that the attached list for anticipated purchase of materials and services exempt from the bidding process be approved as presented.
May I have-
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And the chair votes aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
So the motion passes 4-1. Item 44.
I move that the request to increase the purchasing limit for classroom instruction materials be increased by an additional $200,000 be approved as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And the chair votes aye. Opposed?
Aye.
And the motion passes 4-1. Item 45.
I move for approval of the School Board Policy 2.71, which is the policy prohibiting discrimination.
Second.
Any discussion?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mrs.
Sorry, I can't put my marker on, but if I could make a comment.
Yes, Mrs. Ziegler.
Thank you very much. So again, I will be voting against this with the reason that there is one item that I do not support, but the context and the purpose of it is something that I do support. It is definitely a challenge when making decisions that even if there is one item in it that you don't support, having to make a determination which direction to go. I know that this particular policy and the one following it is significant. I know that this district's gone through a lot, and so this was something I championed for quite some time for us to revamp these policies. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get an item stricken from it, so that is why I'd be voting down. But in its full context, outside from that, it is something that I do believe and support, that this will bring our district forward. Thank you.
Mrs. Goodwin?
Well, I support this policy because I think it's a great policy. We spent a lot of time, attention, and money to have the Crow organization in Philadelphia help us with this policy. Some of the things I like about it is it does relate to LGBTQ and to the procedures that we have instituted in that area so that students have a say in middle and high school as to whether we inform their parents or not. This is a really important issue for these students. This is an important issue of mental health and safety. And so I'm glad that we have included that, but I think it's a wonderful policy. I have reviewed a lot of policies throughout the state when we first discussed this, and we're looking at hopefully sharing some of these good procedures and policies and best standards with other school districts.
Mr. Robinson?
While I did vote for the bulk of the items in the consent agenda, there is still an item that within this and the next one, like Ms. Ziegler, that I have issues with, so I'll be voting against it. Thank you.
Well, I would like to say that I'm very thankful that this is finally being passed, because we've been trying 3 or 4 times. We've brought this forward for approval. I've gone back and tried to revise it, and it's never been sufficient. So I'm glad to see that we will approve this because it's a much-needed policy change. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign.
Aye.
No.
And the chair votes aye, and the policy passes 3-2. Item 46.
I move that the revised School Board Policy 2.71A, Discrimination, Harassment, Complaint Procedures, be approved as presented.
Second.
On the discussion? Mrs. Brown?
Yes. What I think is really good about 271 and 271A, the procedures, is that it clearly says that each school site will have an equity coordinator that will investigate complaints on the school. But the procedures talk about how we go through that, and we will have an equity officer at the district that will follow those complaints, and the ones that the district will handle will be the ones basically about employees. So if a student complains about treatment from a teacher, it won't be the principal's position to do the investigation. That will be going on to the school district to be handled at the district level. And there's even procedures if, in fact, the complaint is against the superintendent or those coordinators, so that we have a procedure in place to handle those types of complaints.
Mrs. Goodwin?
Well, I'm strongly in support of this because I think that a policy is only as good as the procedures that are instituted that will bring us and make sure that we're in compliance. Our 2.71 has a very strong component for Title IX officer, which we have not really brought forward in the way that we should, and I think this is also important component of this policy procedure, and so I am very delighted with the way it's written. I think it's easy to understand and easy to follow, so that we don't get into trouble, so that everybody knows what's expected and what is not expected, and how things will proceed if there are issues. So I'm very delighted with this, so I am in support.
I'm also very happy with this procedure because I'm one of the people that got caught in us not having the proper procedures in trying to help someone, and now it's all spelled out as to what is needed to be done, and I'm very happy that this is here, and hopefully will pass.
Madam Chair.
Mrs. Bridget, Mrs. Ziegler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, just for the record, again, I would actually echo everything that my colleagues just said. I think this is a great improvement. The policies and procedures that are included here. Unfortunately, the language, as it will be no surprise to my fellow colleagues, the language in the procedures that stated as related to parental notification includes the language of the best interest of. In my opinion, that still remains ambiguous and doesn't identify how that determination is made, which again is largely why we are including procedures to eliminate ambiguity, and for that reason I will be voting against this. But aside from that language, everything else in these procedures I do support and believe it will again strengthen and protect our district employees and students. So thank you.
And I'm very happy that the student will not be outed to his parents, if they choose not to, because if a student is not close to their parent and cannot talk to their parent about something as important as this, there has to be a reason. And I would hate to see a student really be intimidated or be even beaten as a result of this not being what you want to quote as normal, whatever that is. But I'm very happy that that's in here, that we will take into consideration a student without the parental consent. I think it's very important for our students. All those of Mrs. Brown?
I too want to say that it's important to talk about what those objections are to this, and what it is about. The parental notification is always in the best interest of the child. I wouldn't want to have a student, LGBT, afraid to complain if he was being bullied or harassed. And I understand even a teacher could harass a student over this, that they should not be afraid to come and tell and report it. It's against our policies to harass somebody for those instances. But if a student can't come to school and can't go to someone and to report because, they don't have that support at home, I don't feel that we have to force the issue, that the student needs to be, and I think we always have to do what's in the best interest of the child when we're looking at what we need to do in our school district.
Amen. Mrs. Goodwin.
Well, I just say to add to that, I've talked to students over the years about this issue, and I've talked to them in other parts of the state as well, and they are many students who might have LGBTQ lives feel that school is their safe place. They're accepted. Most students today look at us and say, well, why don't you understand? Why don't you get it? But their parents many times don't. That's why I'm so afraid for them, the ones that have stayed home this long a time, because they really need to get back to school, because school is very often their safe place. So I cherish their responsibility, their sensitivity to this issue, and many of them would rather commit suicide than to be honest with their parents. I mean, it comes down to that. It's an issue of their well-being. It's not an issue. And so I think that this is a really great procedure, and I think we should go forward with it, and I'm looking forward to this becoming our stated procedure.
Well, I've had direct contact with something like this when my children were younger, and I had one of my son's friends was a young man, and he came to me and talked to me about it, and he was about ready to kill himself, and I took him to a psychiatrist so that he could get the help that he needed. He was 20 at that time, and his mother didn't talk to me for 20 years because she was so upset that he came and talked to me rather than coming and talk to her. So I've had personal experience with this, and I'm so happy that this policy is written as it is. All those in favor, please say aye.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, before we close.
Yes. Mrs.
For the record, again, I think it's important to note there's nothing in the procedure that specifies LGBTQIA. However, I believe that a number of the following statements that were made were in reference to that. Again, the procedure just indicates in the best interest of, they don't identify specified situations. So just again, for the record, want to clarify that it is just in the best interest of. There is no direction on when those cases would be, evaluated as such. I just think that's important to notify, since the following statements were very specific statements. So with that, I close.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, like sign.
Aye.
No.
And the chair votes aye, and the motion passes 3-2. Number 47.
I move that we approve Emergency Policy 2020-2 COVID-19 face coverings as presented.
Do I have a second? Here. Jane, take this. I'll second it. I just want a second to the discussion. Okay, I second it.
You want this back?
No, she can't provide over the motion now.
Mr. Robinson.
Jane asking me, or you?
I can ask you.
Okay. Can either Dr. Kingsley or Chris Reinoff come up, please?
I just have questions.
Yeah. This was one of those agenda items where I talked after Jane, and Jane and I agreed with Jane, just to be consistent. And Jane, Ms. Goodwin, Madam Chair, interim chair, she brought up the issue of requiring it for middle and high, and then strongly supporting for elementary school, if I remember correctly. That basically, and then I said I agreed. And then somehow or another, it came back around, and it was mandatory for all. And I kind of got a little lost in how that happened, but I understand it. And I'm just trying to seek your guidance. On the one hand, I understand mandatory mask will increase the probability that teachers will come to school and come to work, which I talked about earlier, how important that is. But on the other hand, I have, kindergarten teachers, first grade teachers, elementary school principals saying, we can't be the mask police. It's going to be so distracting in the elementary school, chasing the kindergartner around, trying to get his mask on. So I'm trying to balance those two conflicting results out. And then I see studies that say 10 and under, not likely to get it. But again, I'm really concerned about making sure teachers feel comfortable coming to school, and the parents feel comfortable bringing their in. So can you help me with my conflict? I asked Chris over elementary, because my issue is mainly elementary, and then Dr. Kingsley, because there's no more person more empathetic than anybody in probably Sarasota County, but certainly in the school district, than Dr. Kingsley. Our own little Mary Poppins, if you will.
So you say, can we help? And I would say no.
No? You can't help me in balancing that internal conflict that I have?
You know, the guidance that we're getting is...
Do you understand my internal conflict, Dr. Kingsley?
Yes,
Okay.
it's my conflict too. I totally understand. And there's a lot of concern from both sides. You know, 49% want masks, 49% may not want masks for elementary. But I think the way that Art has written this, with allowing outside time to be free of masks, and I'll let Chris address this, but I know our teachers in elementary, if the mask policy you pass, they will make sure that our children have breaks and, you know, can function with the mask and safely take breaks away from the masks.
I mean, are you directing principals if they come into a class and not every kindergartner has a mask on? Are you going to admonish the teacher? I mean, how's it going to work out in a real situation, Chris? I mean, you've been there, you know, at elementary Ashton. I mean, what are your thoughts on this issue?
Well, the first thing I would just want to say, and I just want to make sure that they can hear me through the mask, is that, you know, kudos to our teachers and to...
Speak up there, Chris.
Speak up, Chris.
Kudos to our teachers. There we go. Kudos to our teachers and to our students. Honestly, there are a variety of procedures and expectations that we have in our schools that at some point in time you look and say, how in the world can we go ahead and have anybody adhere to those on a consistent basis? And that's exactly what happens, because our teachers are so amazing, our students are so responsive, and our parents are so supportive, and our administrators, that's exactly what we want to do. We want to practice, we want to reiterate, we want to educate, and we want to just kind of get everybody there. If there's a misunderstanding, or, you know, if there's somebody that has an opinion, strongly against wearing a facial covering, then I think those are personal conversations that you have, either both one with the student, depending on the level, but also with the family to help them understand. And that goes for staff as well. I want to make sure that we have those conversations with our staff so that everybody understands the real reason behind why we're doing this in the first place.
So, Dr. Kingsley, if you were me, would you vote for this?
Luckily, I'm not on your side of the dais.
Right, because my issue isn't about people having a particular problem with wearing masks. My issue is with the conflict of wanting teachers and everybody feel safe, and the teachers saying, I can't be the mask police.
And we don't want them to be the mask police, but we do want everyone to keep each other safe.
Are you guys going to be understanding for kindergarten teachers? That's what I probably wanted to know. Are you going to be more understanding for an elementary school teacher than for a high school setting? Can I at least ask that?
I can tell you right now, I would just knowing our administrators and our teachers, there's understanding, and it's going to be compassion for sure. They're definitely going to understand every single situation, and each one of them is different. You know, to your earlier point, again, I think it's really important that, again, we provide a variety of opportunities as outlined in the policy for students to have those opportunities for breaks. Just like they do with brain breaks during the school day, there's opportunities built into this policy for kids to be able to take those facial coverings off.
And for a matter of consistency, I look forward to hearing Interim Chair Goodwin's opinion.
I'd also just like to point out that we're talking, and I realize it's easy to blend these concepts. We're talking about masks. The policy is face coverings, and the requirement is that an individual wear potentially a mask or potentially a shield. And that was based on, we tried to write this policy based on the conversation that we heard at the board meeting when this was discussed, I believe on the 14th. So that was taking some of those concerns at least into account so that one can be in compliance with this by wearing either a mask or a shield or both.
Thank you.
Mrs. Goodwin?
Well, I had questions about the shield. I think our beautiful chair looks gorgeous in this shield, but I thought the shield could not be used except in accordance with a mask. So my questions, and the reason I didn't second was that I had questions about this. But first, I might interject this. I've been doing some research on this, good or bad, and reading as much as I can read. And you know, now with the advent of more children being tested for COVID, they're finding little children have a lot of COVID cells in their nasal passages, maybe more so than children 10 and older. And we know children 10 and older can transmit the disease very similarly to an adult. They don't seem to have as much air passage, airflow, and younger children, and they don't do that as much. But we're still learning, and we're still seeing more cases that are younger children. We had, unfortunately, 2 more children that died yesterday in the state of Florida. Teenagers, but died nonetheless, bring our total to 7. But my question really was relative to the shield, which is cosmetically much more aesthetically pleasing to me than a mask, which sometimes I feel like I'm going to choke. So did Michael Drennan say to us that when we had the barrier shield, that didn't take the place of a mask? Yes, he did. But did he also say that it didn't, you know, that you had to wear both when you wore a face shield? I'm confused.
I don't recall that he said you had to wear both. I think he said if you had both on, it increased your protection.
Right.
Each layer that you have on increases the level of protection.
I got that.
But I think that if it's a young child and they're wearing a face shield and they have their desk barrier, they still have 2 layers of protection.
So if they don't wear a mask and maybe they wear a little shield, maybe that's less offensive for them than the mask. Although I will tell you all that I see a lot of little tiny people now in the grocery store and other places wearing a mask quite nicely. Yep. And again, I love the fact that we hear parental involvement, but I think it's up to a parent to start encouraging these children to wear masks for a little while. I think we could even have some fun with it. I think we could have mask contests. Shirley and I would be glad to bring in our sequins and glue guns and whatever. But I mean, I think we could have some fun with it. But that was what I needed, was before I voted and approved, I needed some clarification. If we say, or some of our teachers say, okay, we're all wearing shields, then that's okay.
That's per the policy.
Well, I think everyone can wear a shield per this policy. I don't think it's a teacher who's telling the students which of the things they should wear pursuant to the policy. I think it's their parents would be deciding whether their child is what their child is wearing.
Well, exactly. I didn't mean that the teacher would ascribe to one thing or another. But my point being, do teachers feel as safe with shields as they do with students wearing masks? That's my one question. And then from a health department standpoint, is that an okay thing? Then I'm fine with it.
Well, I'm far from an expert. From what I've read, masks are probably better than shields. Shields are certainly much better than neither. Mm-hmm. And I think, I'll just speak for myself, we were trying to do what the board discussed last time, but I think if you're going to pass a policy, if you wanted the most strict policy, it would be just masks. Mm-hmm. I think then you would have potentially more issues, perhaps particularly at the elementary level, because of some of the concerns that were raised. I think you might potentially have more people seeking exemptions, whereas it might be more difficult to get an exemption from a healthcare person who might say, yes, I agree, Johnny shouldn't wear a mask, but if you say, well, but could they wear a shield, the person might say, well, okay, they can wear a shield. So in order to...
So maybe we start with this policy, and if it doesn't work, we bring it back and become more stringent, or make a change?
Can always change it. The hope is, you have to have exemptions. There are people who have legitimate health issues. Mm-hmm. So I think you have to have that exemption for people. You would hope, I would hope at least, that healthcare providers will be thoughtful in signing such exemptions. I think it helps to give the additional option of the shield in order to perhaps limit the number of those exemptions, but that's up to the board to decide, obviously. This is an emergency policy, which means it's good for 90 days.
Right.
It can be amended within that period of time, but it's only good for 90 days. My thought is, if this is passed, or when some policy is passed, that we will then take that policy that the board has approved and go into a normal rulemaking situation, which would give notice, et cetera, to put it in place for more than 90 days, because it's unfortunately likely we will not be through all of these issues in 90 days, and not to have it forever, but to have it in place for the 2021 school year. It can then it can always be ended early if we're in that position, or it can be extended beyond that, but through normal rulemaking. So this is good for 90 days, but I would say we will get on to a normal rulemaking process to replace this emergency policy in the next 30 to 45 days, so that you can have a policy on day 91 already in place.
Well, in that case, I will be in favor of this, knowing that if it presents problems, we'll have to go to Plan B, which would be to come back with something a little more stringent. So I'm fine with that.
Mrs. Brown?
Can someone tell me what a commercially produced respirator is that someone would use?
I believe that's in reference to the N95.
Pardon me?
The N95 masks. I think
That's
they're
the
also
N95. It's not the one with the vent.
No, the ones with a hole won't be allowed, because the second part of it also states it has to be of a solid cloth material. So it has to be completely solid. There's no lace.
But under one, it says a commercially produced surgical mask, respirator. So I just wanted to be sure that the commercially produced respirator isn't the thing with the vent, because the vent will let that's the whole point of the respirators, that it lets the air out.
Right.
I think it's also important that we tell, for those of us who are watching and can't see this, is that it also asks for a commercially produced or homemade cloth face covering, provided they cover both the mouth and the nose and fit snugly around the sides of a person's face with little or no gaps. And the face covering shall be made of a solid cloth material or other suitable solid material. Other than cloth, I'm not quite sure, but it may not be made of lace, mesh, or largely porous material, and the principal shall have the final authority to determine what's suitable. And I would imagine that's a lot like what our dress code is. And as our dress code, if a student does not want to put the mask on or takes it off, and I'm not talking about the little kids who can't handle it, it's insubordination, and the student will be sent to the office, and parents will be asked to come and pick them up. And if they don't have a medical reason to not wear the masks, they will be asked to be taught remotely.
We would encourage them to choose a remote option if they don't want to wear a mask or a face covering.
I saw on a hint, so to speak, on Facebook, how a mom handled this to get her youngster used to wearing a mask, and that was, because yes, the kindergartners are on the computers now. They said that if you're going to have screen time, either at the TV or the computer or the laptop, that you have to wear a mask when you're doing that, so that the kids are used to wearing the masks. And I've got nieces and nephews and whatnot that are wearing the masks. My daughter teaches kindergarten, and she's got a risk. She does the chemo. Her immune system is compromised. And I would very, very much be concerned if they weren't wearing masks. Because I think that's the one thing that gives me peace. I mean, that if we're all wearing the masks in those classrooms, we're not 100% safe, but I think it's somewhere 90, 95%. We should be pretty much safe if we're wearing the masks. And they do allow them to take them off while they're eating, because that was something else that I realized when I went to the restaurant. Oh, you take your mask off when you sit at the table, and you go, wait a minute, that waiter is coming over, and he's going to be this close to me while he takes my order. I better put my mask back on. So it's while you're eating, because probably at lunchtime is where you're going to be closer to someone than when you're not. So, we just have to be smart and not let our guard down. And I think this is so very important that we have this. And I know there are still people out there that don't understand, but, even our president and governor now are wearing masks and when public. So I think that to ask our students and our teachers to do it, it's for their health. And that is my number one priority. I've got a personal stake in this. I've got a daughter who teaches. I've got grandchildren in the school. We need to do this for all of our staff, for all of our students. I'm done preaching.
I was going to ask you that. You done?
I'm done.
All right.
I am a little bit concerned about the face shields, because I've heard a lot of people be concerned about the face shields only. And I don't know.
I would not wear a face shield if I were going to the grocery store. I would have my mask on. So there are certain instances where I would not wear a face shield. In here, I would wear a face shield.
And I would think, too, if there's a student in a classroom with a face shield and the teacher feels uncomfortable about it, you could ask that they wear the face mask instead or in addition to. And, I would think at some point, it's common courtesy.
All right. All those in favor of item 47, please say aye.
Aye.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
Can I speak? I'm sorry, I wanted to speak on the motion before. I haven't had a chance to comment.
Go, Mrs. Ziegler.
Okay, thank you. So hedging off what Mrs. Brown just mentioned is I think something really important. I appreciate Mr. Hardy's work on making it flexible, because there, as if we recall the discussion for the plan, my preference was to have it have more flexibility, particularly as it pertains to younger grades, but also I was very concerned about the waiver aspect, because I do realize there are a multitude of circumstances in when a face covering, particularly a mask, would not be a viable option for a number of medical and instructional purposes. So I appreciate that we've changed it to face coverings. My concern is particularly hearing some of the conversations that have been said here, and especially if you go on social media, it's no surprise that this particular topic is very polarizing, and that I understand that a face shield is something that is meant to protect the individual wearer, but the optimal amount of protection is going to be a face mask and a face shield. Face masks then also protect the outside people, and in the event of any kind of exposure to COVID-19, it minimizes the amount of people that would technically have to be quarantined if you look at our map. I think for families, and I can tell you as personally, I have my children wear a mask occasionally when we go out in public, which isn't very often. However, I tell you it's very difficult, and the experiential side of it is something that I know many parents are grappling with. I'm one of them as well. However, I think going to Mr. Robinson's side of trying to weigh this, protecting our staff, protecting our school environment, but also being realistic to the, to the realities of being, particularly the younger side of these kiddos, wearing them all day and what that instruction and environment looks like is something that's very tough for me. Additionally, there's so many things you can read that one person will say that it's dangerous and worse off for them, or others will say it's okay as long as it's 10 or over. So with that, I think the compromise of face coverings is a good place to start. I know it's only 90 days. I do want to mention that it concerns me that if a family chooses their option based on our policy, face covering to be a face shield, I am concerned that I don't want that individual child or teacher, goes both ways, to be ridiculed by whomever because they chose that option. I think that's an important part of approving this policy, is you're allowing for those flexibility and those terms. I understand Mrs. Goodwin's point of watching and making sure and seeing if there are needs for additional mitigation strategies, but because again, I go back to the environment, and if you read people's comments about face coverings, that kind of tolerance is not acceptable in our district. We allow this policy to pass, then that is the individual's choice to make those decisions. So I think that's a very important clarity that should be made sure that that's clear. by the board before approving this, because I can foresee those problems occurring. So to clarify, Mr. Hardy, that is in fact the individual's decision on whether the face coverings listed here.
Yes, as long as you're wearing, under this policy as it's currently written, individuals have to choose one of these types of face coverings, and it's up to them to decide which one they want to use.
And therefore, and I don't know if this is the appropriate question for you or not, but essentially because that is our policy, X individual, whether it be a parent or a teacher or an administrator, would not be able to enforce otherwise.
No, this would be the school board's policy, and it is this policy that would be enforced.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Okay, all those in favor of? Are you still speaking, Bridget?
No, I closed.
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, likewise? And the chair votes aye, and the motion passes 5-0. Item 48.
I move that the board approve the revised 2020-2021 student calendar as presented.
Second.
Under discussion, Mrs. Brown?
Yes, this calendar shows we start the 3 weeks later. We will also extend our calendar by just 2 weeks because we are taking out some days that we had originally scheduled off. As the Monday and Tuesday before Thanksgiving we had scheduled off. They will be working now. And then there was the Friday before President's Day was going to be a 4-day weekend. That's going back to a 3-day weekend. And then there was 2 days before the spring break, the 11th and 12th of March. We took those days off. They are now on, if you can follow that. So we were able to take those 5 days, put them back under our calendar. We moved some teacher planning days, professional days up because of our schedule being up. And I'm thankful that even though we got that 3 weeks change, that we're only extending it by the 2 weeks.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Any opposed? The motion passes 5-0. Item 49.
I move that the School Board of Sarasota County approve the 2019-2020 student progression plan as advertised.
Second.
Under discussion?
Why are we doing 1920?
Because we haven't passed it yet.
Okay.
This is the fourth try, I think.
No, Madam Chair, I think there was advertising issues. I will be voting against it in consistency. Nothing's changed. It's just not about the advertising aspect.
Okay, so all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed, likewise?
Aye. No.
I got you. So the motion passes 3-2. The next monthly work session is scheduled for Tuesday, August 18th. The time to be determined. And the next regular school board meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, August 18th at 3 p.m. Is there any other discussion? Mrs. Brown?
I just want to say, we had a workshop this morning where we talked about our reopening plans and some of the concerns that we all had. A shout out to our communications department. They've put out will be putting out 3 videos that will be on the site, and we've got a return to work that will be going to teachers, and then there's a return to learn that will be going to parents. That'll answer a lot of the questions. A lot of the questions that came in, they've kind of put them together in here. And I, like all the other board members, have received hundreds of emails, calls, concerns about coming back to school. And, as I said, my daughter teaches here. I've got grandchildren going here. I've got a personal stake in this plan. And I feel that it will be safe for them to come back. We are doing everything we can to help make them safe. And, I know some teachers are concerned, we've got, all the essential workers that have been out there working, those in the hospitals that have been with patients. And, we're getting equipment also. And look at all the waiters, the waitresses, and the clerks. I think our teachers are even more essential than some of those employees that have been out there providing. It is very important for our kids to get back into the classroom because, all down the line, they've been talking about how essential it is for our kids to get back to that one-on-one, face-to-face teaching that they've been getting. It's important that we go back. We have done remarkably well in trying to plan for this, and I really hope that if you haven't made up your mind yet, check with your school, find out how we're going to be looking at it. They're getting all those numbers in. We will know what school's going to look like soon, and know that we've done everything we can at this time to make your coming back safe.
If you have any further questions, please go on the district website under frequently asked questions, and I'm sure that there'll be an answer to your question there. I know that staff has been fielding hundreds and hundreds of questions, and the answers are on the district website. And also you will see a letter from our new superintendent, Dr. Ashwin, and to all of the community and the teachers and the parents. So please go on the website, and if you need any information, or you can call our communications director. We just had a heart attack. Thank you all for attending, and thank you for listening in. We stand adjourned.